RetroGaming Radio 2003. Keep it retro.
RetroGaming Radio.
RetroGaming Radio.
RetroGaming Radio.
RetroGaming Radio. This is Don Bluth.
Hi, this is Conway Ho.
David Crane, the developer of Pitfall.
And you're listening to Retro Gaming Radio.
Retro Gaming Radio 2003. Keep it retro. Hello, folks. Welcome to the November 2002 edition of Retro Gaming Radio. I'm Shane R. Monroe, your host. Welcome to the program. Well, folks, I'd like to start the show off with just a couple of announcements that we need to make here. First of all, a big congratulations to Bill LaJudas for winning our Name the Segment competition that we ran last month. The new show segment is called Bits and Bytes, which, by the way, was a very popular entry. Out of all the entries we got, I'd say just about everybody submitted that one. However, Bill, you were first, so you win the great prize, which is the autographed Dragon's Lair 3D action figures. Dirk and Daphne matched pair will be coming your way. Congratulations, Bill. Nice job on the contest. And thanks everyone else for taking time to write us in. Even though you weren't a winner this time, please do enter our contest in the future. We've got lots of cool stuff to give away in the future, and there's plenty to go around. So congratulations again to Bill LaJudas for winning our Name the Segment contest. Brian and I, my producer, decided to talk about the format of the show, and we've pretty much established that the entire year 4 here is going to be 1.5 to 2 hour shows. This whole 2003 season is going to be that way. Most of the interviews are going to end up being two-parters. We just can't seem to cut enough out to make these things fit into a single episode of Retro Gaming Radio. So we decided to go ahead and adopt the format of running the longer shows and running the two-part interviews. We're sure that's going to upset some folks, but I think the other folks are really going to appreciate the fact that we didn't cut a lot of this stuff out, because there's lots of good stuff in there. Speaking of extras, to try to get all of the stuff that we need to get into the 2003 season, we're going to have 2 special episodes this year of Retro Gaming Radio. That's right, a special Thanksgiving edition and a Christmas edition of Retro Gaming Radio. Basically, the story here is, folks, you gotta be a studio pass holder to get in on the action. So if you are not a registered studio pass holder, you need to do that. It's free. We're not going to spam you with an email. We're not going to sell your address to anybody. All we want to know is who you are, get an idea of what kind of listener base we have. So please sign up. Basically, the shows will be available through January 1st. Now, let's say that you missed the Thanksgiving show. You realize you missed out. You sign yourself up. You'll still be able to get to the show until January 1. On January 1, both shows are jerked from the schedule, and it will only appear again on the Year 4 CD. So make sure you get signed up so you don't miss those 2 cool new shows. The Year 4 CD, by the way, we're really working on something special. For those of you who may not understand how our formatting is going to go, basically, from this point forward, we're going to have a single year per CD. Now, the Year 3 Special Edition Archive CD that's for sale right now covers the first 3 years of Retro Radio. From this point forward, every CD set that we release will cover only the previous year. There will still be the first 3 years to collect. There's simply just not enough room, folks. And we want to be able to release unedited, full meal deal of some of these interviews and a lot of our content. And the only way we're going to do that is to have a dedicated CD set for each and every year. We're going to throw in lots of goodies. There'll be something super special on there, but we haven't quite got through the logistics of it yet. But in December's show, either the actual month show or the special Christmas edition, we will tell you all about the Year 4 CD. And trust me, you guys are going to love it. Instead of the regular old rant this month, I'd like to instead take a letter written to us by one of our devoted listeners and kind of address some of the points that he brings up, because I think this is some of the stuff that's been going around the forums, which, by the way, we have message forums. Hit the site. We've got, you guys can come and talk back. We've got quite a few people, and there was some very interesting conversations, so please drop into the forums and check us out. But I'd like to just address some of these points per se, point for point. and just kind of give you guys an idea of how I stand on some of these things, because I think a lot of you feel the same way this guy does. So I'll address them all at once. He writes, Shane, I am 34 years old and have played Pong in 1976 and have had an Atari 2600, Genesis, Atari 8-bit computers, and PCs, and you only talk about the present, but there were clones of games back in the early 80s and late 80s. Not only were there clones of games, they caused a crash back in 1984. Where were you then? Well, TS, first off, knockoff video games didn't really cause the crash. If you want to get educated a little bit more on that, there's a link at the bottom saying what caused the crash of video games. You can go ahead and check that out on your own. Please read and be educated on the topic. There was too much product to meet demand. And if you think there's no way it could happen again, I'm afraid you're wrong. It's already happening. So much, in fact, that console people are trying to do anything to make their product dual purpose. While they believe that this will help the cause, it won't. If I want a TiVo, then I'll buy one. I'm not going to buy a PS2 because it might record TV shows as well. It's the whole TV VCR combo thing. No one that cares about a product will buy two products melded together when it just can't do the job as well as a dedicated product. TS goes on and says, your view of the world is so jaded that even David Crane didn't agree with you. That's pretty sad for someone who is nowhere near the status of David Crane and thinks his opinion accounts for something. TS, what is it with you people? You all focus on one question he agreed with all you engine whores on, but then failed to get the important part of what he said. He said, quote, engine whoring is great as long as you don't make the same game over and over again. Now let's see. Quake, Unreal Tournament, Doom, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, 1942 that just came out. Well, they all pretty much look like identical games being put out to me. Now, I saw a screenshot for 1942, and I thought they were releasing an expansion pack for Return to Castle Wolfenstein. The war first-person shooter is the current incarnation of clone games, but they're all really Doom and they're all really Quake. They're not even bothering to change out the graphics now anymore. If you listen closely to David Crane, you'll realize that he agrees with us on many levels. And even the ones he doesn't, you can tell he is talking straight up as the CEO of a company. Now, he wasn't always in that position, folks. Listen to the part 1 where he talked about kicking the marketing people out of the room. Now his life is one big marketing campaign. TS continues, games have always been about money and they always will be. It's a business, and you think the early days of video games were so much better. No, TS, I believe companies and people were so much better. Games will always have hit and misses. It's all a matter of how many. Every era has their share of knockoffs and crappy titles, but back then, programmers gave a rat's ass about what came out of their computers. Money was just a fringe benefit of enjoying that process. David Crane is about the only interview that partially agreed with you people. I have a guy from Gearbox that finally fesses up what the market is really like, and I have people like Paul Norman that told me the market used to be a lot different. You guys must think I just make this stuff up. Wait until I get the interview with the mystery developer. Shame I can't say what company he works for. They'd fire his ass on the spot for what he has told me and what he will tell me. TS goes on, but there were not any better than what we have now. It was a different time, but you are so jaded about today's games that you only care about games from the past. I happen to love both. Games from the 2600 kick butt, but so do many of today's games. But you are so blind and jaded that you won't see that. So tell me, TS, was jaded on your vocab word-building calendar for today or something? Let's take a look at that word, shall we? Jaded, pronounced jaded. Worn out, wearied, dulled by, surfeit, sated, cynically, or pretentiously callous. Well, hey, you're right, I guess it does fit. But it also fits you. It also fits the millions of game players that won't touch a game if it's not based on the Quake engine. It also applies to dozens of game developers that have tossed out the concept of innovation for the concept of engine whoring. The Atari 2600 had 1K of memory. Hard to imagine with hundreds of games that you would get the diversity that you actually do, doesn't it? What excuse do you give the PC world? A system that could reinvent the video game weekly with the vast array of hardware and software available. The 2600, at least they had an excuse. Now, everyone thinks that I say all new games suck. Never said that all new games suck today. I played 4 hours of Grand Theft Auto the other night. Amazed? I finished Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Unbelievable? I even tried Unreal Tournament 2003. Surprised? I swear you people think I never touch a modern game and that I sit in a cave with a 2600 joystick plugged in my butt and never see new technology or games. I forced myself to try out Unreal Tournament 2003 just to make sure I wasn't missing something, and I wasn't. I liked the theme to Jedi Knights 2 so much that I played it, despite the fact it was just another shooter. In fact, when I got to the swamp level, my P3800 and GeForce card couldn't keep up, so the game went in the crapper. Okay, thanks for a balanced system requirements game. I'm saying you have to wait 3 to 5 years between real gems on the PC. In the meantime, you spend $50 a pop for expansion discs and clones. TS says, look at the 2600 and look at all the clones. Look at the Genesis. Actually, TS, the Atari 2600 didn't suffer from clone issues at all. In fact, I think you'd be damn hard-pressed to find more than a couple of instances where you could say, damn, that's the same game I played last week. The 2600 suffered from piss-poor licensing and piss-poor product control. You want to know about product control, Gestapo style? Go ask your buddies at Microsoft. Then listen to our Gearbox and Rick Dyer interviews later this year. Crappy movie titles like E.T. are what deep sixed the Atari. And that and the video game crash, of course. Atari was actually innovating when the crash came along, and they continued to try afterwards. Now, of course, they're the most hoard property on the planet. What a crime. The Genesis ended up as a marketing vessel for ESPN, folks, okay? It's a damn shame, but for the sheer amount of titles, there was a great percentage of innovation and a handful of piss-poor ports. The NES should have been so lucky. TS says, Super Nintendo games with emulators. Look how boring most of them are. And I say, well, I've never liked SNES. More proof that you don't listen to the show very closely. TS says, they're just changing the graphics in the game and keeping the same playability. Somehow you skip all this and think today's games suck. What? I never claimed SNES had any originality. And yes, I do think a majority of today's games suck. You are correct. Have you even played, TS goes on, Battlefield, 1942, Warcraft 3, Asheron's Call 2, MechWarrior 4, The Sims, Mafia, and Earth and Beyond? Let's see. Let's go through them. Battlefield 1942, clone. Hell, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Warcraft 3, biggest waste of 3 years on the planet. Clone. And again, they didn't even bother to hide the fact. I didn't get excited the 2 years in a row I saw them played it at E3. Then when nobody cared anymore, it came out. Although I will give my hats off to Blizzard for caring enough not to release it until it was at least finished. Only a handful of companies on the planet have the nads and pull to actually not rush a product out the door for Christmas. Hats off to Blizzard. Not necessarily for a great product, but at least for upholding some value. Asheron's Call 2. Why didn't they just have a big Me Too stamp written on the outside of it? The least you could do is credit the games they were stolen from. Oh wait, it's Microsoft, and you call me jaded. MechWarrior 4. Dude, people that love mech games hated that game. I have never liked mech games, so I can't really say, but I do know a lot of people that despise that game, despite being fans of the genre. By the way, I did try it, but I can't play games with 85 button combinations that basically require a special controller. I'm just too old. What about The Sims? Great. The first time I played it, when it was called Little Computer People Research Project back in the 80s. Sure, I've played it. Habbo Hotel and Shockwave, free, playable online with millions of people, and deliver on the same promise that The Sims does not deliver, which is interaction with real humans. Mafia, you got me. A game I haven't played, but it sure looks to be cashing in on the popularity of Grand Theft Auto 3. Earth and Beyond, you got me there too. By the website, I'd say it's the only remotely interesting title in this whole bunch, but then I despise multiplayer games. And while it looks intriguing, since it's basically online only, I guess I'll never know. TS goes on to say, I'm not even an avid PC game player, and I've seen these games around in beta form. These are not first-person shooters, yet you say they're all crap games. Please read above. TS goes on, then you talk about Rare joining Microsoft and how bad working for Microsoft is. I know people who work at Microsoft, and it's just not true. Well, TS, yes it is. I've worked for a company that worked for Microsoft. I have first-hand knowledge of how it works. Plus, listen to future interviews, and we might just have a couple of assimilated companies to give us an interview or two to substantiate our claims, since we obviously can't be right. These guys love their jobs, and they're not executives. See, I happen to work with a company that works with Microsoft daily. I called them Thursday afternoon to work with their latest Windows Media 9 codec and player, not yet available. That's funny, it's available at this link that I had pasted right in the email. And by the way, I haven't met a single person alive yet that likes Windows Media Player above 6.2. Why do you think Microsoft keeps it in every new build of Windows? Man, you call me jaded. Windows Media Player is Microsoft attempting to own another segment of the market and nothing more. Too bad the end consumer is always the victim of Microsoft. TS goes, and they love what they do, and look at Bungie. They love working for Microsoft. Dude, they work at a company. Okay, the people who work at a company right now aren't going to tell you jack. You wait until they can't lose their job for saying something, okay? I've met and spoken with the victims, not the people that can utter a word about how unhappy they are and get the axe. That's who you got to talk to. Future interviews will help you better understand what we already know. Honestly, says TS, I would hope the company I work for would get bought by Microsoft. Then we would have more resources, more money to spend. It's easier making deals with people because you're Microsoft. I also have email conversations with Jay Allard, and I make suggestions about the Xbox. Well, of course, TS, man, doesn't anybody listen to this show? Everybody wants to be bought by Microsoft. I'm sure I've said that at least once, probably twice. People start companies specifically to be bought out by Microsoft. Then again, I've been in a company that felt that same way until Microsoft actually showed up. Then everybody was freaking miserable. Oh, except the executives. Give us $10 million so we can continue to embezzle cash. My office needs a new 46-inch widescreen plasma monitor. Okay, thanks. And maybe you can have your buddies at MS explain to you the dramatic turnover that happens at a company recently acquired by them. My guess is they won't tell you a damn thing. And you can make all the suggestions you want about the Microsoft Xbox, okay? They're good managers, and I'm sure they nod and smile, tell you how great the idea is, and then toss it right into File 13. They have the next 5 years mapped out, and consumer input is not going to make that deviate, unless they speak it with cold, hard cash. Now, if you don't have open eyes about how crappy Microsoft is to content developers and the public by the end of the year, after listening to the interview with existing Xbox developers and our secret inside sources, then jaded is too light of a word for you. I have been involved directly with 2 companies, quote, working with Microsoft, and interviewed, spoken with a half a dozen more. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. And you can thank Microsoft for lick-sank, too. The only solace I take is the Xbox Live is going to lose tons of cash. Not like it'll make a dent in the endless Microsoft coffers, of course, but they are already losing an estimated $250 a box on the product. Xbox Live will cost them even more money. Of course, no one will admit when I'm right about that, because Microsoft will have you believe that every home in America is playing live 18 hours a day and it couldn't be making more cash. Microsoft can buy success, and it's really sad. TS continues, sure, a few Rare employees might leave because they want to continue to work with Nintendo, but honestly, go onto the Rare boards and employees have different opinions. Some don't want to have to relearn a new console, but most are happy because Nintendo is overbearing on Rare. Look at how Nintendo gutted Retro. TS, Microsoft preys on the innocent, just like AOL does. Who's Microsoft targeting now? The damn near inventors of the Me Too games, which is Capcom. Why? Because they posted, what, $12 million loss last year? Microsoft's getting lazy. They won't even go after companies that have a strong portfolio to assimilate. I swear if I look up Predator in the dictionary, I'll see the Windows logo. Well, TS, thanks for making my morning much more interesting. Be sure to discuss it on the message forums, too. I'm sure other people would take your side. This show is about controversy and opinion. Everybody deserves their opinion, and we all deserve the controversy. Thanks for writing in, TS. That'll wrap up our rant for this month's episode of Retro Gaming Radio.
During the past 2 years, Gary Goldman and myself, Don Bluth, have been out on the road doing seminars for all those young, interested students in the art of animation. And we've just neglected all those friends that we have right here in Arizona. So we are now going to have a Tune-Up 2002 seminar right here in Arizona. It's going to be at the East Valley Institute of Technology. And we're going to cover some great subjects. One of them is drawing and the language of drawing. I want to talk a lot about character design and just what do you go through to design a character? Animation, of course, that's the key thing, and we'll have a lot from there. Storyboarding, which is my big forte and the thing I love most. We'll get into acting and, of course, directing. And all of you out there who have interest in any of these subjects, we'd love to meet you, shake your hand, and look at the light in your eyes and see if we can't help you get to where you want to go. So, I'm asking you to be there. This is going to be fun. If you want to get a ticket, log on at donbluth.com. The date will be November 15th, 2002. We register at 8 o'clock, or you can get a ticket on donbluth.com, and we start sharply at 9 o'clock a.m. So be there.
Well, folks, welcome to the Bits and Bytes segment of Retro Gaming Radio, where we tell you about all the juicy little tidbits we've gathered up surfing the net over the last month as regards to classic games. We don't have a whole lot for you this month. We've all been pretty busy, but what we do have is kind of interesting. First of all, for you die-hard C64 freaks like myself, DC64 for the PlayStation 2 has been released, and of course we'll have a link there for you, which is really funny. It should be PS2 64, I would think, but Anyway, I guess he went back and revisited the DC-64 on the Dreamcast. I still can't figure out how a console like the Dreamcast can have trouble running a Commodore 64 at 1 megahertz. But, hey, I'm not an emulation programmer, so what do I know? I do know that I'd much rather see a Dreamcast port of the C64 emulator versus a PS2 or an Xbox port. One, because I own a Dreamcast. And two, the Dreamcast has become like the ultimate emulation box these days. I don't count Xbox, folks. Microsoft's just going to slam that door on that stuff lickety-split. They've already tried a number of times, and they're going to continue to try until they keep you guys out of it. Hey, you know, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to buy an Xbox to make it a PC, go buy a white box with a video card, plug it into your TV, and you'll actually get the promised value that you're actually buying versus trying to sit and hack this thing. What else is on the agenda here? The backlit Game Boy Advance. Yeah, we've been talking about that, and it seems that there might just be a little more than just rumor to having a backlit Game Boy Advance, and we got a couple links down there for you to check out. Fashion your own opinion, but I can honestly say we're very excited about seeing the Game Boy Advance get to be backlit. Then I could buy one. I simply won't buy a Game Boy Advance where it ain't backlit. I am spoiled, folks. I've got a Dreamcast. I do have a Dreamcast. I got a Sega Nomad, and I got a Lynx. There's no excuse for no backlighting, okay? Even those games had it. See, what's next on the agenda? Combat 2 for the Atari 5200. It seems that people just can't stop making games for classic systems. Mean Hamster Software produces Combat 2 for the Atari 5200. We got a link down there for you. Be sure to go check that out. They got some screenshots posted. My producer wrote over and said, no new MAME has come out for 104 days. There's got to be a record in there somewhere. Who knows? Maybe they're plotting something really cool for us. Yeah, we'll see what happens on that. Hey, remember last month I told you in this segment about Microsoft was on a quest to hire hackers to update security on the Xbox, which goes along with what we were talking about earlier. And I got to read this to you. There's going to be a link down there for as long as it's good, since none of the other links seem to stay up. This is a crack-up. The Microsoft had posted this ad. Here's the job description. I got to read this to you. This just cracks me up. The job description for the hacker to beef up Xbox security. The candidate will also be responsible for conducting security design reviews on Xbox hardware and software. Read that as scouring the net for hacker message boards. And will assist in designing hardware detection code fragments to be embedded in future versions of the product. Lock out all mod chips. That's just a little translation there for you. To be considered, candidate must have familiarity with x86 assembler, PC bus architecture, and boot sequence details. In other words, have already created a boot disk for the Xbox. Hardware knowledge and low-level software experience required, which basically means that you need to have an Xbox circuit board tattooed on your ass. Working knowledge of cryptography and common copy protection mechanisms a plus. So if you're part of Fairlight or Eaglesoft, please leave your resume. Preference is given to those with hardware backgrounds and game hacking knowledge. Hey, you know what? You don't get punished anymore for cracking and hacking and breaking copy protection. You get hired by Microsoft. God, I love the world we live in today sometimes. And the last little tidbit we're going to pass along here for you in the Bits and Bytes section is the little archive of classic TV commercials. It's a nice little website that has just a whole bunch of cool little commercials for you to check it out. I'm going to give you a link, of course, here at the bottom of the page. It's pretty neat. It's nice to be able to see, going back and looking at some of the old video game commercials and comparing them to today's, basically showing of cutscenes. So do check that out. I think you'll get a big kick out of it. And if you look around on the net, there's a company. I should give these guys a plug. I wasn't planning on doing it this show, so I just got caught with my short stand. But there's a company that's doing archive commercials on tape. Basically, they show up at CGE every year. I'm sure I've talked about them on the show in the past. Basically, these guys scavenge their old VHS tapes. They plead to other people to send them in copies of commercials that people have managed to capture, in between TV shows based on classic video games. And while, some of these tapes are like fourth generation, folks, and it shows, the bottom of the truth is crappy quality or not, rolling screen or not, flickering between color and black and white or not, seeing those old Toys R Us commercials and stuff like that, you definitely got to check that out. If they've got a website, when we go through to produce the show, I'll post a link for you. If not, just search for the TV commercial, I think it's the Video Game TV Commercial Archives Volumes 1 and 2. I'm sure you'll be able to find it on the web. It's interesting stuff. It's definitely a nice little trip back to the past. That's going to wrap it up for this show's edition of Bits and Bytes. Well, folks, Don Bluth Films invited me out to their studios in downtown Phoenix to come and talk to them a little bit about their forthcoming video game Dragon's Lair 3D. Don Bluth and Gary Goldman were both on hand to give us their unique perspective on both Dragon's Lair 3D and, of course, the various gaming industry and the animation industry. This month we feature an interview with Don Bluth where we answer some of the lifelong questions that people have had about Don Bluth games and Don Bluth films. And that's about sums it all up. Of course, if you don't know who Don Bluth is, you haven't been listening to the show long enough. Go look him up. There'll be a link at the bottom. And at this time, I'd like to turn us over to Mr. Don Bluth.
Dragon's Lair 3D is the new game coming out that you're affiliated with. You guys aren't actually making the game per se, but you're a consultant team on it. You also did the animation work for it, the 2D animation for it. Now, tell us a little bit about that. Now, this is some new animation that you folks have put together specifically for this event.
Yeah, the hard part about going in and making a sequel to anything at all is to capture the spirit of the first one without sounding old and tired. And I think when Rick Dyer came to us and said, let's make a Dragon's Lair 3D game, my question was, what is it about that first game that really was attractive? And no one really knows for sure what that is. But I said, the Death Nodes. I think the Death Nodes are fun because they're just corny and strange and weird enough that weird is kind of fun to watch. And he said, well, here's the plus side to me of making a new game. It says, because the technology is so much better 18 years later, we've got technology that will allow us to do things we couldn't do before. So the game probably could have even a longer life. And I said, longer than it has been? He said, yeah. He says, and we could create more rooms that have been there before and more fun. And I said, could you make it look like it was really animated, like 2D animated? And he said, yes, they have a software program out there called Toon Shader. And he says, and we can make Dirk like you're animating it. And he said, but furthermore, it isn't just a strip of film that you're watching like the first game. And if you make the right decision, you get to watch the next little bit of film. And if you make the right decision, the next bit, and so on. This is one where you will have control over Dirk's movements. You control which way he moves and everything by, how you're directing him. So it becomes a little more programmed learning in a way. So you're involved in it. I thought, well, that's really interesting. He says, but the more interesting part is that Dragon's Lair, the first game, has been on the shelves for 18 years and should not have done that, because games don't stay on shelves for that long, and still commanding space. And it said, so there must be something out there it's connecting to. So with all of that, in all of that debate, we finally said, okay, let's move forward with it and see what happens. We don't have a whole lot to lose here, but we definitely need to try and make it look as much like the game as we can and keep the spirit of that game. So, and I think Dragonstone, which is the company with Rick Dyer that have produced this, have done a really, really good job. Because we got involved in the story part of it, what the characters and whatever new characters are going to be. And in the beginning, we went off making a thing that had all brand new characters. And I remember the publisher we were signed with at the time said, whoa, hang on. Where are the characters that we all know and love? The Giddy Goons and all the rest of them, the Lizard King. So we went back and thought it through again and put a lot of the old characters in. A lot of the old rooms were in there. And even the rooms that you go through in the castle, rather than make them look totally just CGI, we mapped in the backgrounds and painted them all over the walls so that it looks kind of the same. But there are 300 and something rooms, 360, I think, rooms that you have to get through, and it'll take a player, if he's really, really good, it'll take him a long time even to get through them. And also you have to pick up little treasures along the way, and this time Daphne is helping you get through the game. She's talking to you all the time. And so it has a lot of things that are pluses, that are better than before. The one thing that I myself miss is the Death Notes. And they're not there.
Those aren't there at all then.
No.
Oh, that's too bad.
But the one that is kind of fun is we thought to help the game kind of segue into this new format is we would put some animated 2D animation on the front of it and on the end of it so that you start with the 2D animation, segue into a 3D world, and then go through on that adventure. It's been very successful in all of the test markets that we've done it. You know, people have liked it. And the kids like the gameplay. And that was the part that I had my fingers crossed on.
Absolutely. Kids are fickle.
Yeah, they will. If they don't like it, they won't like it.
What sort of concerns have you addressed during the entire creation of the game to appease the original lovers? I mean, the original people that played the game obviously may or may not have transitioned into a 3D gaming environment. Some of us are still stuck back playing the old 2D games.
You know, that's a good question. They probably, a lot of the kids, the original ones who played the game, have grown up, gotten married, have kids of their own. 18 years later, you know, they're probably, many of them, the same place they were back then.
Sure.
Some maybe have jumped over into the 3D world, but I don't know how many.
Yeah, a lot of people my age seem to be still reliving the past. I mean, I still play Pac-Man.
There's an old saying that, you know, the music that you liked when you were in high school and the things that you did in high school you seem to cling to. You know, that seems to be the moment that you hang on to. I don't know. I really don't know. I know that the name itself, Dragon's Lair, will probably pique someone's interest. And if their children, the children of the original players, like the gameplay, it could be something that they enjoy together. Because I know moms and dads can't entirely ignore that their children are in a cyber world.
Truth.
So you can't do that any more than I, who would like to ignore the cyber world, cannot anymore. You know, you have to get in it.
Now, this game is actually breaking new grounds again, just like the original Dragon's Lair did back in '83, right? Give us some ideas. What sort of things set this aside from any other game that's out right now?
Well, the way I think it's really the obvious way is on the Xbox platform. It's really high definition, and it is a first in high definition games. Really high definition, and I don't know all the figures on that myself because I'm extremely uninformed on that. But I have seen on the Xbox platform, I've seen the game on this big widescreen with digital information on it, and it's clearer than any movie that I've ever made.
Really?
Yeah, it's just really, and I look at it and I go, wow, just wow. It made my jaw drop, and I hadn't seen that in any of the games when I go to the game shows and E3. I look at everything around me, and it all seems to blend into one kind of big one.
Sure.
You know, and they all look alike, and they're all about beating each other to pieces, and they're all very, very noisy. And when they all get under the same roof and they all play at 15 decibels as loud as they can, it's to go crazy. So I walk around and I look at it with my earplugs in and look at it as long as I can. But when I saw the Dragon's Lair high definition, which is a first, I definitely knocked my socks off. I thought it was really kind of cool. And another thing we've done with this Dirk thing, Dirk is more like a story. And the story of Dirk and Daphne and how they work together to get themselves out of problems and situations and everything still is in the game, which was really a big part of making the first Dragon's Lair game. What are these two characters to each other? And the definition of character and personality is really what entertainment is all about. For years and years and years, I suppose, the movie industry and the arcade industry have been, throwing rocks at each other and very highly competitive. Because one goes up, the other goes down, like two little buckets in a well.
Right.
But more and more, I think what is happening is the gaming industry is entering the entertainment industry. And perhaps it's the other way around. I know the movies, each one of them making their own games, too. So
sure.
The two seem to be walking hand in hand. But to me, I have a special definition of that, and that is to make something interesting and identifiable, you have to define character. So it isn't just good enough to say, here's a big bad guy who has lots of armor and a big sword, and here's another bad guy that has a big sword, and it's to see, they're going to fight it out in an arena to see who wins, because why should I care?
Right,
who
absolutely.
wins? Why should I care? I know when we were making a movie called Titan AE, when I was boarding that, I would enter all kinds of spacecraft that would come zooming into the picture, and they would get shot, and they would go down, and so I remember one time one of the company executives, he looked at me and he says, those 15 aircraft that you just shot down and they died, he says, who are those people? And I said, oh, they're just part of the enemy. He says, but I don't know them, do I? And I said, no. He says, and I don't really care if they got killed or lived.
Right.
And I says, yeah, you don't, do you? And he says, so why are you taking my time talking about things I don't care about?
Interesting.
So we wound up pulling all of that kind of thing out of the movie and say, if we're going to shoot anybody down, it's going to be somebody we've already met. We know something about them. We like them. So that we can actually generate an emotion out of it. If you don't know anybody that's up there fighting, you're not invested in it.
That's interesting. There wouldn't, because that's pretty much common fodder for any film. If you watch a war movie, hundreds of planes are shot down. You don't really know any of them. It's more of a this is a tragedy, and it's something to key you emotionally in. As a tragedy, you know that there are people on there. You don't necessarily relate to them, but somebody, that guy's probably had a family, or that guy. But
you don't stop and think about it. There's no time. A movie is so fast.
You don't. You don't have that time.
And probably what it is, too, is, of course, war is a tapestry against which you play a drama. And it depends on what you focus on. If you're focusing on the tapestry, you won't feel a thing.
Right.
But if you will pull to the other increment, which is the drama of it and the people and why you care about them and why you like them. Why do I like Luke Skywalker? Why do I like him? I can look at him, and of course that's something, but I know a little bit about him. I know that his parents were killed, and I know that, he's struggling to get ahead, and I know that, he feels kind of like an underdog. And there's things about him that I say, oh, I know that. Oh, I feel that.
Sure.
And as soon as that starts happening, now I care what happens to him. So that seems to be the key. And if the gaming industry starts putting more of that kind of thing, focus on character, into their games, I think the response from the players will be more intense.
Do you think they can do that? Does Dragon's Lair 3D do that?
Not as much as I would like it to. I would like it to. And I even think, years ago when we were making the first game, the little light globe that went on over my head was, with even this first we had, which was the laser disc, which is what this fancy term called random access, where you can access any moment on the disk. It took a couple of seconds to get you there, but if that's possible and you can go to any situation in just, a nanosecond, that means that you could create entertainment, dramatic stories that depict evil and good, and you could have multiple endings, and you could be part of selecting which ending you were going to, not even knowing, but it's an adventure in which you're part of deciding how the drama unfolds. And movies haven't tapped into this yet because, unfortunately, with the movie industry, they all chase the audience instead of being innovative and creative, and striking out to find something new.
I think that's really apparent in the video game industry. That's one of the things we talk about a lot on the show is the Me Too gaming and and movies have followed the same path.
Maybe it's human nature. Maybe that's the way business works because nobody wants to take a risk. If they risk and it misses, they get fired, they lose their cars, they lose their everything, and the college funds for their kids. And so everyone's a little bit afraid to roll those dice too much. And I know we have a funny thing that we talk about in the movie industry, and that is nobody in the movie studio will make a decision all by himself. It has to be done in groups.
So that everybody hangs or everybody good.
That's right. So that, when the shrapnel flies, you're not the only one that's going to catch it. But that's a tough way to make something because it defies or it flies in the face of true creativity. Creativity involves risk, and you have to risk it, and you may lose. But if somebody somewhere doesn't stand up and take a risk, then the new and the fresh and the exciting does not happen. Surely Star Wars was a risk when it came out.
Absolutely.
Everyone in the whole of Hollywood said, no, space movies don't work.
Right.
But there was a guy who believed in it enough, George Lucas, who just kept pushing and pushing and pushing till he made that a reality.
Because it wasn't always like this. In the old days of video games, the marketing department and everybody was shut out, and the developer sat down and said, I'm going to make a game, and when it's done, I'll give it to you. Not when it's Christmas time, I'll give it to you, but when it's done, and I like it, and everybody I know likes it, then I'll turn it over to marketing, and you guys can sell it for us. We hear that a lot when we do interviews with classic game developers. They said in the old days, we sat down and we did it. Now, it's all development by committee. The developers themselves have written into me saying, I'm in the middle of this project, and somebody walked over to me and said, you've got 2 weeks to add this feature. Not whether or not it can be done in 2 weeks, or whether it can be done right in 2 weeks, or whether it would break the rest of the game or the integrity of the game. You got 2 weeks. Make it happen, or type your resume. Does that happen in your field? It
happens in every field. I think that is the dictation of the economic world. And I know years ago the very statement you just made, Shane, was I'll make the game, and when I've got it made, then you can market it. Walt said that very thing to people at his studio. He'd say, I'll make the movies, and when I've made the movie, you can market it. So it was, the very same thing. Well, I think what happens is when a movie shifts from that, the production, it shifts over to the marketers, and the marketing it's driven by the marketing. Then they say, I want these characters in there because I can merchandise them.
Yes.
I want this character in there because that'll get me, something with Sears Roebuck. I want this character in there because that satisfies the music community. And everything is about how much money can I get out of this.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's kind of where our economy is right now, and it seems to be accelerating in that direction to where the only thing that is important is the profit. It's a sad situation to get into, and I don't know where that slows down or where people back up and say, hang on, I think we threw the baby out with the bath, and maybe we better back up and say, let's first create and see if we can make something nice, and if we can. But that takes money to do that. Someone has to put up enough money to say, okay, go make this. Make it the best you can, and when you've got it made, we'll figure out how we're going to market that.
There has been, in the gaming industry at least, a couple of instances where a company has basically taken 4 years, like with what's happening with Dragon's Lair 3D.
Right.
4-year development cycle is a very long time for a video game, and I'm surprised actually that it was basically allowed to be taken that long, because really every developer that I speak with is basically, they're on an 18-month schedule at best, if not shorter. Because it's Christmas time. Everything revolves around a holiday, or everything revolves around basically a financial pivot point. But there are some companies that have gotten away with it in the past, and now they basically have carte blanche to do it again. Like Blizzard Entertainment, for example, with Warcraft 3. They've had that in production for 4 years, and they still haven't shipped it, or they just shipped it, this last year. But in most cases, there really isn't. There isn't that leeway. Well, basically, you're on a schedule not only to meet the demands of what they want from you, but also in a time frame.
Movies suffer under the same umbrella. Someone will say, we have this money to make this movie. It has to be out by this. Titan AE is a good example. It has to be out by this date. When Bill Mechanic gave us that movie and he said, okay, I know you didn't develop the movie. I don't have anything to make it right now. I don't have another concept for you to work on right now. This is the movie, but the only reason I'm going to give it to you is because I need it in 18 months.
Right.
So you say to yourself, can I make this movie in 18 months? And then after you get into the movie and start making it, there's all these audience reaction interviews. We were making the movie for the teenage audience, preferably boys who would like the space genre and all the hardware that goes with it. But then when they would bring in the mothers and their kids to watch this movie to get an idea of where the movie was going, they would bring in kids, grade school kids. It wasn't the teenagers at all. And then they would fill out little information sheets, questionnaires. And in these questionnaires, they would ask them certain things about the movie, and then they would respond to it. So gradually, depending on or responding to those interviews, the movie changed from a teenage movie over into a children's movie.
Interesting.
So all the time you're making it, people are being guided because they don't trust their own instincts. They're being guided by what they're being told.
Sure.
And not only that, those reaction interviews should probably have happened somewhere in the Midwest and not in California, because the people in California, the moms, the kids and everything, they're just waiting for those interviews because they know that anything they say is going to cause a reaction. So they go there planning to, stir it.
Sure.
And they do. And so, in a way, it's a part of the same problem is that there's nobody with vision that's actually leading that huge investment called a movie. And that same thing is happening to the gaming industry. Where's the visionary that's leading that somewhere that you can say, wow, this is a cool idea?
Yeah, that seems to be a problem. How does that affect you as a movie maker? You've sat pretty much under every hat that there is for creating, producing, directing, animating, everything to do with the film. How does that? Like Titan AE, for example. Were you happy at the end?
No. Titan AE was a hybrid. It was a thing. I don't know very much about science fiction anyway, and I'm not what you call a huge fan of science fiction. I've gotten to be, but when we started that, I was not. And so you go in there and you say, okay, I remember all the science fiction movies that I've seen, and I have to be sure that I don't copy them. So I put immediately a guy right beside me, and I said, every time it looks like that I've said a cliche, I want you to, tap me on the shoulder and say, you can't do that. So then I would begin to explore things that I thought were exciting to me. And in the boarding and in the character designs and in the situations with the characters. So even in the writing, when you get the script, you have to look at the script and you say, is this scene interesting? Does it really have tension in it? Am I interested in what the people are saying to each other and what they're all about? And in many cases, I was and wasn't in that case. And it's kind of a cliche to say there's a young man who has the key to saving the world. If you go into any bookstore or any video shop, there are shelves of that premise. This is a young man who has the power to save the world. Can he do it?
Right.
So we're not in any new territory here. It's just how we unfold it may be different, whatever it is. I thought some of the things were interesting. The one that attracted me the most was, by the end of the movie, we had to prove that this Titan machine could actually create a planet. And we really didn't spend enough time showing that because we'd run out of time and money.
Sure.
So we had to do it. And the movie was getting very expensive, and the marketing at 20th Century Fox was beginning to ask themselves, can we get our money back? So, that was a big consideration right there. You go into it best you can. Usually a movie or a game is such a big project that no one person can do it alone.
Right.
So the one person that's going to spearhead it has to have some kind of power enough to at least say, this is where we're going, come with me, follow me, man, we're going there.
Do the people end up, though, in that position regularly that honestly have the clue?
No. No, I think there's a few. There's a few. I've known a few people. Like Disney owned the store. He had control of the money, and he had a brother, Roy Disney, who was working with him. Okay, because of that, the two of them, even though they may have had their differences of opinion, the two of them worked together. And owning the store allows you to make the decisions.
Sure.
All right. Steven Spielberg is another case, I think, where somebody has enough clout and enough money to where he can make decisions, and usually that allows some bravery to happen. The person will say, I really want to see this, and if you really want it bad enough, you'll go for it. But if not, let's say that you're in an employee situation and you work for a studio, and who's going to tell you? Because everyone who works at a studio who's an employee is going to say, I don't want to lose my job. So They start with that premise, and they say, so someone's going to have to tell me what to do, because if I just do my own thing, what could happen is I could get in terrible trouble and I'll be fired. So that means 400 employees, maybe, will sit around in their chairs waiting for an order. And there's nothing creative about that.
No.
So you get in a situation where you say, this is not a good situation. And so then you have a studio head who is going to say, well, I'd like to see this. So everybody tries to draw what they think he might be seeing, but they're not sure. And they put it all out on the table, and he'll sort of parade by it and say, well, I like this, and I like a piece of this, and I like this over here, but I don't know which one I like. I'll know when I see it. Keep going.
I'll know when I see it. That's
and
classic.
And that's exactly what happens. I don't know. I would suspect the same thing happens in the gaming industry. Whoever is up top and is managing somehow is going to call the shots. And hopefully that person has the vision of where they're going.
One of the things we talked to, like the godfather of platform gaming, David Crane, I wouldn't expect you to know who he is, but basically, he pioneered the running and jumping game.
Mm-hmm.
And he developed a game called Pitfall, which every game basically clones now, anything that runs and jumps. And he started the company Activision, which I'm sure you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
And, of course, over creative differences and whatnot, he wanted to do his thing. They left. Him and his team left Activision. But he had to leave the property behind of Pitfall. I don't know if he had to or if he chose to. But basically, the property was left behind. What they did with that property wasn't good. They took the property and basically by using the name of Pitfall Mine Adventures, Pitfall this, Pitfall that, they implied that his seal was on it, and they sold the game as a David Crane game, basically. And for those of us who basically trusted David Crane, when you see something with his name on it, it's quality. Like if I saw something with Don Bluth's name on it, I know that there's a level of quality and a seal of approval that comes with it. The company basically ran the property into the ground, and we talked to David about it, and we said, well, doesn't that bother you? I mean, doesn't that just...
What did he say?
Look, the Crane said, no. I don't care what they do with it. It's like, well, but don't you feel that reflects on you? And I was thinking to myself, American Tail, they made Land Before Time, especially Land Before Time. It was a brilliant movie, but they got like 10 sequels out now. I know you're not a part of it. And it's blatantly obvious if you watch any of them that, it doesn't hold the caliber. It's more like a Saturday morning cartoon than it is a feature film. Yeah. How does that affect? How do you feel about that?
It's a very bad thing. I did not enjoy the sequel to American Tail, and then somebody not too long ago made a sequel to Secret of Nim, which to me was just I didn't enjoy that at all.
What were they thinking?
Barely had a hard time watching it, but I know that it does happen. It has happened because the products are market driven. How can we make more money out of it? And also, the people with the wallets are not the children. People with the wallets are the parents. And as long as the parents think, well, my children like Land Before Time, that's an icon, well, right. They'll like Land Before Time too. So they just buy it as a babysitter. So it has nothing to do with educating their brain or giving them high quality food or intellectual food or anything. It's just keep them babysat. We started making a movie years ago. This is when we were in Ireland, and it was a movie about a penguin. It was called The Pebble and the Penguin.
Right.
And The Pebble and the Penguin was a really lovely story because the Adelie penguin has a custom of they go find a little stone, a pebble, and they present it to the mate, to the girl. And if she accepts the pebble, they mate for life.
Right.
And it is a true custom that they have. And I thought, wow, what a neat thing to build a story on. So we had a pretty good script going and everything, but we ran into financial difficulties about that time. Our studio was rocked everywhere while we were making this picture. Eventually what happened is Gary and I left there and came back home to America and went to work for Fox. The studio actually went down, but they finished making Penguin, and I could not keep my name off of it. They used my name to sell a story that I had no connection with at all.
Oh, that's horrible.
And they rearranged everything. They changed the story, and they added animation that was awful. But there was nothing you can do about it because, to answer your question, it's oftentimes a legal battle that the lawyers fight. And it has to do with banks and corporations and how to protect people's money. So there's nothing you can do about it. You have to be very alert and very careful because when you launch into any project, unless all of the hatches are battened down, and the sails in a storm are tied up somehow, you can upset the ship. And I have learned that over the years. But I have one picture that's got my name all over it, and I just really don't like that picture.
I'm going to have to go back and see how bad they trash it. I don't think I've ever actually seen that one.
Yeah, and some of those Land Before Times, the characters, I can see them there, but they're not alive. There's no light in them. So there's something missing.
Yeah, and it seems to be more and more commonplace with that, basically writing a movie around a merchandising situation.
Market-driven.
Market-driven is just... It seems like every industry, especially every media industry, be it video games or movies, film, everything seems to be going that way. Can your film company stay out of that?
It's a sign of the times in a way, because our culture. I think America has changed a lot. From the turn of the century, it was a time of hope and enthusiasm, optimism. I know things were growing so fast. America was the world in which anything was possible. Any dream you dreamed, you could rise from poverty to riches. You can do anything in America, and that was a great. That was a great period, I think, in our culture. As I get into today, and you watch the hands of the clock go forward, and I look at 2001, I have to say that a lot of what I see is not hope and optimism, but cynicism and sarcasm. I don't know how that overtook us, or how we got there. I don't know all of the cultural impacts, that caused that to happen. But I know that it's lethal, and I know that until you somehow in your own life, and it has to start with the individual, you slow down and you stop, smell the flowers, and you stop and understand that it isn't all about money. It's about the people you meet. And it's about how you relate to those people and how you get to know them and know that each person is a treasure, that they're important. And people aren't there for you to use to amass your wealth. That isn't really why that's there. And if you interpret life as such, someone who is smarter and stronger than you is going to use you to amass their wealth.
Right.
And so you'll get what's coming to you. And if everybody keeps doing this, pretty soon the whole movement, the whole energy is moving in that direction. And I don't see a good ending to that.
No.
But if you can just on an individual level come to care about the people that you talk to, the people you relate to, the things you do for other people, it changes the way you look at the world. So I think that's part of it. I don't know what's going to turn that around. I think stories are strong and stories can inspire. And maybe inspire is a good thing that we all could use. Certainly, I think the 911 was a moment where everybody got a board up to the side of the head.
Yeah.
And it woke everybody up, and it was a very costly thing to happen, but at the same time, it did cause them, I say us, it did cause us to stop, pause in our tracks, and reconsider. Do you really, really feel bad for the 5,000 people that died? Do you really feel bad for all of the aftermath and all the families and all the people that were affected by that, how horrible that really was, and how much sorrow and pain that is causing? Do you really feel bad for it, or is that just a fashionable face to put on?
Oh, Jeff, don't even get me started on that. That's something that just drives me crazy. The bandwagoner American, unfortunately. But that's a whole different topic.
But it's fashion.
It is. It's exactly right. Everybody else has a flag stuck on the back of their car, so therefore I must have a flag. These are the same people that would never, clutter their car up with a bumper sticker or any sort of thing.
Yeah.
But now, heaven forbid, we have to have a flag.
But in all of that, though, I think there are some who genuinely open their eyes.
I think so, too. I just don't think there's a majority vote on that
No,
one.
and you'll never get a majority that's all walking in the correct path. There'll always be a minority that's trying to hold the majority up. And if it weren't for probably that minority group that's really trying hard, you could just simply pull the chain and let it all go. But no, you have to believe that there's a purpose in life and that you're here to accomplish something, and it isn't to make money. It can't be that. But
you got to you can't leave with. I mean that sounds cliche. The can't take it with you bit, but you really can't. I mean, you've got to answer at least to yourself in the end. I mean, I've never been through the death process myself, but I imagine it's pretty final. And at that last moment, there's got to be that reckoning moment where you've got to say, did I do what I was supposed to do? Have I fulfilled what I was supposed to fulfill? I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about, right?
And what do you can't sum that up on a bank account. You can't. Now you could say, I've touched millions of people with Secret of NIMH. To some people that is the definitive, classic, traditional 2D animation. That's all that's left. That's the last bastion of it. And that there are people out there that feel that way. Do you feel complete with that?
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But I suppose you're given however many years to live here on Earth. Given meaning somebody is giving it, and you fulfill those years in a certain way, and you fulfill them with either integrity or with compassion and with caring, kindness with to other people, or you don't. Everything is about you. And if you get onto the me stuff, and everything is about you and what can I get out of this, you're definitely on a cul-de-sac, because you're never going to feel any enrichment. You're never going to feel any joy out of that. You're never going to feel anything except that you're out robbing the world. So it's not going to bring you anything. So I kind of, in my own life, what I try to do is figure out, okay, what can I invest? And my time is the investment, not the money. What can I invest in my time that's going to pay the biggest dividend in the end? And the dividends that I want is not money. The dividends I want is the satisfaction or the joy or the happiness that comes from having, contributed or given to something. I always love the expression, an actor's give a performance. They don't take one.
That's interesting. That's an interesting way of looking at it.
They give one. And not all actors know that, because some of them take one, and you can always tell when they're taking one. And they're amusing themselves on screen or stage, and it's all about them, and they're showing off, and it's like, look what I can do, aren't I great? Or you can tell when someone has gotten into the part, and they're portraying a part because they know that by so doing, they're causing you to feel something. And that's giving something.
And that's something that you have to do on all of your projects, being that, you make the actors, basically. There's the voice element, of course, with the voiceover, but in the facial expressions and the movements and everything else, that's really your job.
That's right. And you have to do it, because at the end of the day, someone's going to go into the theater, they're going to sit there for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Animation, probably an hour and a half. They're going to sit there, they're going to watch this, and then they're going to leave the theater, and what do they take with them? And if they really take nothing, and this is basically what I've had a hard time with some of the Disney pictures because they're corporate created.
We call it the Disney machine.
The machine. Okay, but the people that I know that worked in that machine and who are really good artists and still have a heartfelt feeling for wanting to do it, they get caught in the machine, and the machine is dictating what they will create because it's not about telling a story, it's not about giving a performance, it's about how much can we give to the stockholders. So the orientation comes off of service to others to profit. And you can't ignore profit either. Things have to...
Understandably so. The bills have to be paid,
But you can't go entirely over there. If you go entirely over there and it becomes the money machine, what will happen is you start looking at the pictures. They all look like the last one. They all are saying the same thing, and they all look extremely slick and
there's no meat in it.
Manufactured.
Manufactured is a good word.
Yeah.
I think, and that's one of the problems that we have with video games here on the show is they follow that Me Too pattern religiously, and unfortunately, people buy them. I mean, people speak with their wallets. You know, if everybody stopped buying the first-person blast-em-up shooter game, they'd stop making them. They'd have to move on somewhere else. But the indiscerning public doesn't care enough, you know, to basically speak with their wallet and say, "Hey, I'm tired of Quake. It's over. You know, you guys have made Quake for 17 years now. We're done.
Yeah.
You know, we want to move on to something else now." But they don't. I mean, they just continue to purchase basically the same game with a new skin over and over again. That's kind of the same Disney machine sort of thing. There was a time with watching Disney movies that I could say, okay, where are the two wisecrackers? They got to be coming along somewhere. Oh, yep, they're there. You know, I mean, there was, you know, there's a formula to it. Yeah. It's like, you know what? We're about 15 minutes and there's got to be a song coming up. Yeah, there it is. You know? And it's the same sort of thing with video games too. You know,
it's kind of when you're making one of those movies, you say it is a formula. You say you start plugging in the pieces to the formula as you make it, but you're not investing your thought process nor your creative muscles in creating it. That's what happens. But it's also the safe road, because that way you say, hey, well, it worked then, it should have worked now. So everybody has got an excuse, and the stockholders and the people that are leading the company cannot be indicted for what they did.
Right.
So it's a safe road, and that's why it gets there.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately so.
But I don't think all is lost. I think it's cyclical, and usually what happens is they make enough mistakes to where they fall on their face, and then someone says, hey, we're not doing it right. You know, we're going to have to think now. So they get into meetings and start thinking of how they can make it really work. And that's the most exciting part, is when you're on the downside and you have to think to make yourself go up again.
And do they actually tap the creative people at that point in time, or do they
I think they do.
On their own?
I think they do tap them. The only thing I know about the suits is they never totally relinquish control, because as long as they have controls, they dare not let that money and how it's spent go anywhere but their own hands. So they control it. But if they give the latitude, and I think when we made American Tail, Steven Spielberg was really generous. Really, really generous.
It's interesting. He doesn't really strike me as that kind of a generous guy.
Well, he was one of his off days, but he
owned.
What he did is he gave us space, he gave us the money, he gave us the idea, and he says, just make me something that I didn't really have. Let me watch even. Because I want to be part of this experience. Because he liked animation so much. And so as we went into that, it was really a great experience. You know, and he was there, he was helpful, he was kind, he was, you know, all those things.
That's nice.
Then it was different on Land Before Time, because now he knew something. Not a lot, but he knew enough, you know, to stir it. And he brought in George, and so there were two moguls in there, and it got harder and harder. Then he went away to Japan to make, I think, Empire of the Sun. And so he wasn't accessible to us. We couldn't get storyboards okayed, but we were still spending the budget money without inventory. So it got harder, and it was different there. And I remember Land Before Time, he just said, all I know is it's about 5 dinosaurs. You know, we get 5 eggs, they get hatched, and these 5 dinosaurs get separated from their parents, and somehow they get reunited with their parents. That's the story. So then we started in with a couple of writers, you know, trying to figure out, well, how do you flesh that out? You know, put a little detail on that. So that
15-minute animated feature. And
you have to go back to character again.
Sure.
You have to say, who is Littlefoot?
Somebody you have to care about.
Yeah, and why do I care about him? And who is Ducky? And who is Sarah? And, you know, all these little characters. why do I like them and how are they different from each other? And when you bring them together, how do their personalities clash, conflict? So that's what made it fun to watch. But if you go plot, just simply plot, which is what happens with the sequels, you get into the plot. After a while, you say, I don't really care what the plot is because I'm stopping the caring for the characters.
Sure. And maybe that's why sequels just don't typically work, because you've gone through the character build. Let's say the first one was really good.
Yeah.
And you've built the characters. You care about them. Now it's like, I'll continue to care about them, but you're not giving me any more. You're just throwing them in another, like in a serial situation. You know the characters, but
that's right.
Now let's get some story back.
Well, you have to have surprises. You have to have little moments that delight you and that sneak up on you and you didn't know they were coming. You have to have moments when there's these little epiphany moments when you go, wow, I didn't realize that. That's really cool to say that. So there's all these little adventurous moments that happen in a good film or a good play. In sequels, your anxiety seems to be is how can I repeat this?
Right.
So where's the surprise?
It's true. And maybe that's why video games, in my opinion anyway, have kind of taken a downward spiral, because in, let's say, Dragon's Lair, you had a quest, you had something to do. There was you went through this and you did this, you defeated this, and you win. With modern games, there's no beginning, middle, and end anymore. There's really no story. It's throw everybody in a room and see who dies first. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, that's whatever. If you look at the top-selling games, that's what the top-selling games do. You get everybody in a room and you blow each other up. And somehow that continues to sell. I haven't figured it out. There is no solo experience really anymore. They take all their time and money and effort and put it into the visuals.
But let me bring another example. Even in the movie Highlander, it's basically about that. There can be only one.
There can be only one.
All right, let's kill all the rest off. But it's still at the same time, the Highlander, the main guy, I got to like him right
Absolutely.
in the beginning. And because I liked him, I could follow that other stuff, which is let's get rid of all the rest of the guys. Let's see the effects when he finally does behead somebody.
Exactly
we can see all that. But then every sequel after that wasn't there.
It's true. They kind of.
Because I already knew the guy.
Right.
And they didn't tell me too much more about him. It was just how many more are out there that I have to kill. So it became plot-oriented instead of character.
They occasionally, like towards the end of the series, well, I don't even know if it's really the end yet. I think they're making another one, but they started trying to throw like flashbacks to earlier times when he was dealing with those heavy emotional times.
Yeah,
and he realized that he wasn't ever going to be able to die with this woman and stuff like that.
I think that's why. I mean, the wonderful part I liked in the first one is where he's put down under the water. Sean Connery, throws him in the lake and he sinks to the bottom and he just sits there and he's not dying. He says, you can't die. And it's a great discovery for him.
Yeah.
And for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, no, I don't know how you do sequel. That was one of my big worries with this Dragon's Lair 3D is that how do we sequel this?
Not piss everybody off.
And not make everybody So, it remains to be seen. If the gameplay is really fun enough, maybe they'll be forgiving of the fact. We haven't done a whole lot more development on Dirk's character. The movie that we're making, I think, will.
Right.
I think the movie, it goes prequel, which I think is more interesting. I'd rather go beforehand because you can reveal things that you haven't revealed. And I think that will be more revealing, and we get into a little more who is Daphne. As in the game, she's just simply an airheaded girl.
Right.
And Daphne really isn't just that. So we'll get into more of that, I think, with the film. So the film, I have hopes that could be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And being as I just read the script, I know a little bit more that I can't tell right now. But have you guys where are you at in the production process? You're in pre-production.
We're in pre-production, and I'm doing a lot of sets and boarding right now.
Oh, okay. So you've chosen to go animated with the film?
Yeah, I think it has to go 2D animation.
I think so.
There's a lot of people that say no. The fashion is 3D. You have to go there. And I said, well, but you won't connect with the audience that wants to see this.
That's exactly right. That was one of the big worries that were tittering around my circles was, if they make a movie, are they going to mess it up? And to mess it up would be to go live action or to go 3D, and nobody wanted to see that.
No, and I think there's enough people over in the 3D arena. They don't need any more over there.
No.
In fact, the 2D arena, a lot of them have been running like rats from a sinking ship. So I'm going to stay over there because I think there's still value there. There's still a little juice in that.
I hope so. I'd hate to see it go all the way down the toilet.
Well, I was just watching, the other day I was watching some very old animation, of the early Disney years, and looking at it, I thought, my word, how innocent and how really exciting it was, and how fun it is to look at. And how they've orchestrated the colors and how they've done, the movement itself has a rhythm to it, and it has a very lyrical, almost musical quality to it because of its rhythm. And all of that somehow gets lost in this whole plot world, because you create a 3D character and then you say, well, he has to move from A to B, and he's going to walk like this to A to B, and now I've done it. But you miss somehow along the way, you miss the music of it.
Well, there's a, to me personally, you can always tell the difference when you look at something that's pre-genned and something that somebody draws by hand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your eye, you can't fool the eye. There's not enough, not the word mistakes, but there's not enough variance when you take a computer object and move it from here to here, perfectly developed. And when you see somebody draw from here to here, there's a variance that makes it feel real.
It's a different world.
It's a very different world.
Yeah, we have the world that we live in, which we all know what it looks like. We have the computer world. We all know what that looks like. But that does not look like the 2D hand-drawn animation world.
It does not.
That's a different world. And those are like different brushes on a canvas. And I think just because the fashion says 3D right now does not mean that the 2D brush is obsolete or it's a dinosaur. I mean, that's not true.
I think there's more creativity and I think there's more payback, so to speak, in
what it does do, what 3D does do, is it accommodates the market-driven product.
Yes, it does. Yes,
and
it does.
So by accommodating those fellows who are saying faster, 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 give it to me now, they're only going to say that louder.
Right.
So even somewhere the 3D people are going to say, oh, well, it takes time to do this. So there's no magic in this. Somewhere you have to say anything that's worth having is taking a little time to do it right.
I'm a big believer in that, and that's why, people say, Dragon's Lair 3D, that's like 4 years old, it's been forever. And it's like, well, let them do it right. Stop putting the pressure cooker on them. I'd much rather wait and see it done right than to, have it shoveled.
They have tried really hard to do that, and they have been working for the entire 4 years, because I've been here watching them do it. And they have a pretty big staff. I think there's something like 26 people over there that they have kept employed for the 4 years working on this thing. And there's a lot of problems with it that they've had to solve, which I think they've done quite well. And I was amazed when I saw the final product, because I keep seeing it, it's just regular, there's a game, where's the personality, where's the character, where all that kind of stuff. And when I saw it at the E3 show, played on the Xbox, I went, whoa. I'd like to make a movie that's that beautiful.
That's interesting. So, with regards to Dragon's Lair 3D, what sort of... Because I saw the trailer. I saw the new trailer that has been shipping around, and no one else has seen it. I'm not sure. How do you plan on getting, or how do they plan on getting? I try not to group you guys together because I know you're kind of two different teams here. But how are they going to get that game out to people to see?
They've hired a very capable publicist, and I've done lots of interviews on it. So has Gary. So I know and so has Rick Dyer. So there's been a lot of interviewing going on. We've gone to all of the game shows themselves. We've talked to all of the store managers. I mean, I've sat through hours and hours of store manager things, where they parade by in groups for a whole day, and you just talk to them, shake their hands, and sign autographs, and talk to them about the game. And the response is very, very positive. So we've done that. There will probably be TV commercials that trailer that you saw, that'll be aired on television, I'm pretty sure. So they will begin that blitz on TV. They will probably begin that closer to Christmas, because the stores are well aware of it. The stores, and they've done some ordering. And even the old game, for some reason, this is so weird to me, the first game, they just sent out, they did a whole collection of the 3 games together, which was Dragon's Lair Space Ace and the second Dragon's Lair. They put them all together, and they sort of packaged this as a new version of it. I don't know what
I've got that one. I got it. They sent me a press copy.
Well, they just produced 5,000 of those the other day and sent them out to the stores, and within a week they were all gone. And this is the first game. Why are they just disappearing within a week? They're gone. So I couldn't figure that out exactly, but it is stimulating, evidently, even the first game, so that people are buying those. So I don't know what's happening, and it's anyone's guess. It's like a movie, you just don't know until it happens.
Until it actually goes out.
Yeah. But there is pretty good coverage on it. This morning I did an interview for the LA Times, and they did pictures and everything, so it'll supposedly come out in the calendar section this month.
Cool.
So the newspapers are picking it up. And there's some of the interviews I spoke of. So I think it'll get covered. I think people will know it's there. And then, of course, there's that army or a battalion of parents who were the original players.
Absolutely.
They are going to tell their children about it. And that's the home.
It'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. This again, this is like one of those first things. No video game has survived 20 years. Come back again, reinvented the genre yet again, because that's really what we're talking about. Is well, the gameplay is similar to other games, but they've taken, and like you said, they've basically made it a movie quality game. It'll be interesting to see if people care.
Yeah, it will.
Because that's really the crux. People have to care. Otherwise, they're going to look at the game and say, that's Tomb Raider, which is a game of the same type of genre. They're going to say, that's just Tomb Raider.
Right. Now, a movie is an interesting thing, because when a movie comes out, they know the opening night whether the movie's going to die or live.
Yep.
So that first night tells it. Now, Dragon's Lair, I think when it comes out, people will either like it and tell their friends, it's really cool, go get it, or they'll say, don't bother.
Yep.
So it'll die immediately if it's no good.
And word of mouth is really bad now, because the Internet gives everybody a voice, and people just love to use it.
Well, they'll get on and they'll jangle about this for hours, so I don't know what's going to happen.
The listeners of the show have sent in questions over time, because basically when I started this show back in '98, there were two people that I had to meet and interview with the course of this show. One of them was you, and the other one was basically the person that made me excited about game programming. He basically single-handedly created a series of video games that basically were so far ahead of their time that they inspired me, and that's why I decided to make games myself and blah, blah, blah. So I got him originally, and now I've gotten to have you on the show. And basically I said, I put out, signs saying, if you know Don Bluth and he'd be willing to interview, please write me and let me know, and I'll try to connect with him, and we'll try to have an interview. And people would write, say, hey, well, did you ever get a hold of him? Because I got these questions.
Wow, okay.
And people come up with the wildest stuff, but the one thing that keeps coming back over and over again, I promised all the listeners that I would definitely attack this one. Tell us everything you can about Sea Beast, and let's put it to bed.
Oh, Sea Beast.
This is the number one thing to ask Don Bluth about.
It's a great title.
I like it.
Yeah, Sea Beast. Right after we had made Dragon's Lair, Space Ace, and Time Warp, Gary said to me, he says, you know what, we need to have a whole kind of parade of games that we're going to go into and make, because we had high hopes that the games would go on. And that was just prior to the arcade collapsing and falling apart. So I said, okay, but I don't have any stories made up for these things. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make up what I think are some cool titles, and we'll just put those out there, and we'll put them in a brochure, and we'll say we have a thing called Sea Beast that we're making. We have a whole bunch of others. So we made up these titles. And there was no game ever created. Well, when the thing collapsed, when the arcade collapsed and everything, and we went on actually to make another picture, we didn't ever do it. We went on to make it was American Tail, because right after we made Secret of Nim, we did the games, and then when the game business sort of fell apart, we got into that was when Stephen called us and said, hey, well, why don't we make this movie? I've got an idea. And we went over and talked to him about it, and we went almost immediately into An American Tail. And so we kind of just put all the games aside and said, well, that was a moment in our history. We'll probably never go back there again. We're in the movie business. So we went in there, and 11 pictures later, we're still in the movie business. And then Rick came and said, let's make another Dragon's Lair. But Sea Beast, the only thing I had in my head when I made up the title was I really like, and a lot of those old movies that I used to sit through, people go down in the ocean and they were all in this deep sea diving gear, and there were the squids down there and all the kind. I imagined that there was something down there, and I used to call it the Kraken.
Right.
And there was a beast down there that allowed no man to enter that realm, and someone had to get down there for a reason. But that's as far as I ever got with it. There is no game written on that yet. if everybody wants to use the title, just help yourself.
Because there's a piece of production art that's out there.
Yep.
I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. And there's one, and it's got like this big question mark by it. Was this ever a game? Did it happen? What are the details? Anybody know? Write us in. I mean, there are sites everywhere. If you go search for Sea Beast on the web, there are sites that have that one picture, and everyone's borrowed it from everybody else, and it says, "What do you know about this game?" The Bluth game.
In conceiving all of these different future products, we had to say, yes, we've got these in development. Yes, we're working on these. So we made the art, we made everything, and all I did was tell the artist what I just told you. We know it's about the ocean, and down in the ocean there's a horrible thing, a kraken or a beast of some kind. Okay. And no one will allow, man to go down into that ocean.
Right.
So it
That's
became
so funny.
That's like a forbidden castle. It's like Dirk.
Sure, it's the same idea.
But that's all I know about Sea Beast.
That's so funny. That's like I said. That's like the number one question of all time is tell us about Sea Beast.
How funny!
It's so funny. It's weird what people write in about. That's crazy. I got to get you wrapped up, I guess here. Let's see. I got totally sidetracked. I thought about the Sea Beast thing. The other question that people have asked was, were you involved in the Black Cauldron? And you've told me the answer offline, but maybe you'd like to contribute online to that.
You know what? Peripherally, I was. I was in a lot of Black Cauldron meetings before anybody animated anything, in which we talked story, talked personality. Who was Taran and who was Alanwi, and what were these kids to each other, and what's their backstory, and why are they so stressed out and determined to do this or that or whatever. And I was in a lot of those meetings, and it was a very young period of my career, and so I mainly listened to Wooly Reitherman and Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson and Ken Anderson and all these guys talk about where they think the story should go. And I had ideas, but I was never brave enough to speak up too much. I remember in one meeting I said something to the effect, and they were all in this meeting, all these big honchos, and somebody said, well, what is the story about? He says, well, it's about his survival. And I said, well, survival doesn't seem like much of a motive. I actually spoke up and said that. And Ken Anderson spoke him up immediately, just picked me up on that, and he says, well, you haven't been employed here at Disney's very long. He says. So I said, touche, I understand what you mean. He says survival is a very big motive.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, one more thing, and I'll wrap things up. A lot of people don't realize that you did the animation for Xanadu, the film Xanadu, which most people are very eager to forget because a lot of people didn't care for the movie. I liked it as a musical. I mean, I liked the musical numbers and the sequences, but that video, the 3-minute, 12-second animation that you did was like reference quality for animation. People overshadow the movie with, it was a sucky movie, it was a ripoff of Down to Earth, blah, blah, blah. And if they go in and look at that animation, it
was an interesting time. We actually stopped production on Secret of NIMH to do that.
Interesting.
And it was for, I think Joel Silver was the guy who was producing or executive producer. And anyway, we went in and did it, and a lot of our crew, we only had about 12 of us that were working right then on Secret of NIMH, and so a lot of the crew stayed on NIMH, and I said, well, I'll just go over there. That extra money could really help us out, so I'll just go over there and I'll animate the whole thing. I can do that very quickly because animation is kind of fast for me. I don't
want to think about it.
No. So I knew exactly what those characters were about, so I didn't have a problem there, and I knew if I tried to manage it through some kind of other animators, we'd slow it way down. So I animated all of it. Wow. And the interesting experiences in that whole thing was, I remember once we got it all done and shot, and it was in the movie, we went over to I think it's called Cinerama Dome, over there on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. That's where I saw it on the screen. I remember going in there and sitting down where they were going to show Xanadu for the first time, and I sat there, and this is the only time this has ever happened to me. I knew what would appear in the movie, and as we got closer and closer to it, I got such butterflies in my stomach, and my heart started to just pound because I thought, you know what, this crowd is not going to like that. They're going to think it is so juvenile and so stupid, and I thought I'd be laughed out of the theater. And so when it happened, when it was about to happen, my heart was just pounding in my chest, and I thought, oh no, this is it. I'm going to be completely demoralized here, at least ridiculed, and it didn't happen at all. But that's the only time that I remember getting really butterflies and really, really a heart pound before something I'd done had been shown. And all the rest of the movies that I've ever made, that never happened. But that one. And
I bet you hate. Did you animate to the song, or did they add the song later?
No, to the song.
I bet you hate that song now. I bet you had played that over and over and over.
No, it wasn't exactly my cup of tea, as far as music goes, but it was different, and I understood music enough to be able to hit the beats and everything. With,
it all
the
worked
timing.
out.
But it was a real strange and different experience, and I liked it a lot. And after it was all said and done, and everything, I'm always amazed when people say they like that, because at first somehow the cynicism that exists, how can they just, I don't know.
They bought into it.
Yeah, they bought it.
And it's a beautiful piece of work. I mean, I think it's some of the best work I've ever seen from you. And it looked like you really, blood, sweat, and teared over.
Well, I was liking it. I had enjoyed just animating that. It was fun.
Great. I love that.
And every once in a while, even in all the pictures I made, even when I'm directing, you're not animating. So I've always tried to do at least 30 seconds of animation in every picture, so I can say at least. That
part's mine.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go back now and see if I can pick out your pieces. That'd be interesting.
Oh, you might can. People can tell what I do. They know, yeah. Then the Secret Enigma it was a little moment where the birds are in a little bird bath, and they're all bathing in there. And not in American Tail. That's towards the end of the movie. But it's the one scene that nobody wanted, and it was just 3 little birds who took a bath in a bath. I said, okay, fine, I'll animate that.
I'll put that in there. That's great. Well, thank you, Don. We are here with Don Bluth at Don Bluth Films in Phoenix, Arizona, and we appreciate you coming in, or me letting me come in to you this time and talk to you about your new game, Dragon's Lair 3D.
It's great, and and to all of your clientele out there and all your listeners, it's been a pleasure to sit here and talk to you.
So much.
And maybe we can do it again sometime.
I hope so. Very soon. Thanks so much, Don.
You're welcome.
We want to thank Don Bluth and Don Bluth Films for allowing us to come down to the studio and take up a whole bunch of their time. We really appreciate you giving time to the show, and we appreciate the donations you made for our last month's prize, which was, of course, 2 autographed Dragon's Lair 3D action figures. Dirk and Daphne, was really great of them to hook us up. And we will be covering more with Don Bluth and Gary Goldman in future episodes. What would you rather be doing this Christmas? Opening socks, underwear, Hayat karate, or would you rather be mowing down the bad guys, Operation Wolf style, with your free Act Labs light gun from Act Labs? That's right, Retro Gaming Radio and Act Labs are teaming up to bring you a full-blown Act Labs light gun. That's right, blast your way through the bad guys in Operation Wolf, shoot up the corpses and children, play police trainer until you can't see straight. That's right, Act Labs light gun, coming to you on Retro Gaming Radio, free to some lucky studio pass holder. This is Shane R. Monroe with Retro Gaming Radio saying, keep it retro and blast the bad guys with your free Act Labs light gun. Now, folks, we'd like to bring Gary Kitchen to our interview table. Gary Kitchen, of course, is the great guy that brought us numerous Atari 2600 titles, including the very, very popular Keystone Capers from Activision. He also produced a couple of nice little Commodore 64 titles, including the Designer's Pencil and the very world-famous Gary Kitchen's GameMaker, which was a huge selling title for Activision. Of course, Gary Kitchen is now working with Skyworks with David Crane and some of the other folks that were with Activision in the beginning. And I think that those of you who've been waiting for a real passionate guy to come on here and talk, this is going to be the interview you've been waiting for. So without further ado, this is Gary Kitchen.
This is Shane R. Monroe with Retro Gaming Radio at the Classic Gaming Expo 2002 in Las Vegas, Nevada. I am here with former founder of Activision, a great guy, one of my heroes, Gary Kitchen. Now, if you guys don't know who the name is, you might as well shut the show off now, because this is one of the icons of a generation. Mr. Kitchen, thank you so much for stopping in. This is a great treat for us. Please give us a little background so that folks know where you came from.
Thanks for having me. Just to correct, I'm not really a founder of Activision. I was an early designer at Activision.
Okay.
But the Activision was really Dave Crane, Al Miller, Bob Whitehead, Larry Kaplan.
Credit where credit's due. You're
the original founders. I was in there within a year or two after, but I was one of the early guys. I actually got into the industry from the toy industry. I was designing toys in the late 70s, doing handheld electronic toys. And that market started to get really beat up by the video game market, by the emergence of the 2600 cartridges. So I back-engineered the 2600, and I was on the East Coast. Activision was a West Coast company. and started doing 2600 cartridges on the East Coast. And I did Space Jockey, which came out under U.S. Games. Sure. I did Donkey Kong, came out under Coleco for the 2600. Then I joined Activision. By that point, they had already, they were on their way and growing like crazy. That's when I met Dave Crane, who I actually work with now, and Al Miller. And joined Activision in 1982. Did a couple of titles on the 2600, Keystone Capers, Pressure Cooker. Yes, then I ended up doing some Commodore 64 things, Designer's Pencil and GameMaker. And then in 1986, some of us left and founded Absolute Entertainment, which was in business for 10 years and did a lot of things on, actually did some 2600, did some C64 work, did a lot of things on various Nintendo platforms. Now we're working on internet games, so we've come full circle.
Full circle. How do you feel about how do you feel the industry has shifted from the days when you were working on 2K carts to now, where basically you have resources available that you would have never dreamed possible?
Well, it's kind of a mixed blessing. We some of the old-time designers look very fondly at the days when we controlled the entire project. I mean, the 2K, 4K games we were doing, we did the art, we did the audio, we did the design, we literally did everything. We were in complete control of it from the standpoint of design and gameplay. And that was a very unique situation that led to some really good work.
Absolutely.
Because if you were passionate about it and you had a vision of what you wanted to do, I mean, you really focused on it. And because of the fact that the cartridges were so small, there was no room to hide mediocre gameplay skills behind a lot of fancy graphics and
yes,
like happens, unfortunately, in a lot of cases today. So if the game wasn't fun, it didn't go out. I mean, at Activision, there was an informal review process where when a designer had something that was playing, or not done, but at least a fully playing game, I mean, your peers played it in the office, both
sure,
East Coast and West Coast. If they didn't think it was great, I mean, it was back to the drawing board. You went back, you beat on it some more, and made it great. And so we had our own process where things didn't get out until they were really addictively fun. And that's why the games were great. Today, multi-million dollar projects, huge teams working on them. There's certainly some great titles, but there's a lot of room for hiding behind a lot of full motion video and fancy storylines and licenses and a lot of phenomena that didn't exist. And I will contend that there are $10 million budget games that aren't as much fun as some of the 2600 games.
See, we've been telling people this for 3 years now? Now we got the people in the industry that know.
Okay, you do not know how much we're enjoying this right now. When a programmer comes on and says, Generation Gimme basically sucks. Okay. I want
management.
Huh?
Right. I didn't exactly say it that way, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, see, here's the thing is that we get tons of flack from email from people from the Nintendo Plus generation going, we don't know what we're talking about, that today's games are just as fun as the older ones, that the older games are crap because the graphics were crappy, the sound was crappy, everything was repetitive, blah, 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 blah. And we try the whole point behind Retro Gaming Radio is to basically go, the whole problem with today's industry is that you guys don't have a clue of how the past was, or how good the games were. You guys sit up here and you sit up there and go that yesterday's games were crap. I mean, you read these video game magazines and sit up there and bash you guys. You go
left and right all the time.
Or going, and they're being written by 16-year-olds who don't have a freaking clue.
Yep.
Of what a real good game is. I mean,
these guys never played Keystone Capers.
Exactly.
I wasted an entire weekend of my life.
I wasted a summer playing. Let me tell you how bad I was.
It's good to hear.
Let me tell you how bad I was with Keystone Capers. First of all, I borrowed the game from a friend who never got the cartridge back. Okay.
To this day,
he does not have that cartridge.
Right.
Basically, I stole the cartridge and spent a summer trying to figure that freaking game out. I mean,
so Gary Kitchen is basically responsible for you turning to a life of crime, is what
he's one of the many people.
There we go.
There you go.
He's one of the many people who, if my mom met you, she would probably strangle you because you have destroyed my life. as far as
Yep.
far as video
We've
games.
made a career out of corrupting the youth of
Corrupting the
America.
youth.
We're very proud of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd rather have my kids playing Keystone Capers than say Grand Theft Auto 3.
Exactly.
I agree with you there.
It's kind of hard to get that same sort of feeling.
I mean, we were just standing over at one of the booths over there playing Dragster. Dave Crane's great. I mean, that is a 6-second gaming experience.
Yeah,
and
it's
it is. You can play it for hours. It's addictive as hell.
You can't even get to the start menu button pushed in 6 seconds.
Yep. Yeah. So it's just it is amazing.
I'm a huge C64 fan. I mean, I spent almost my entire life playing 64. I still play 64 games. What else did you work on? I know you did Designer's Pencil.
Right.
And I know you did the GameMaker.
GameMaker, right.
Which was, by the way, unbelievable. I mean,
Thank you.
I don't understand how you managed to squeak that much power out of that box.
Yeah, that was a long project. We worked on that for quite a while.
Can you share stories? Do you have information about that? Because I know a lot of people use that. People just couldn't believe that you managed to squeak that out of a C64.
Well, I mean, we were trying to go in a different direction at that point. We had done a lot of traditional games, arcade-style games on the 2600, and then the computers came, and creatively we looked at them and said, well, we could do, some cool games on these, but I just had this interest in doing something a little more creative. Not that making games isn't creative, but I wanted to take something in a different direction. So I did Designer's Pencil. I thought it would be fun to be able to control this little pencil going around the screen and write programs.
It was fun.
And it was a neat little toy, but a lot of people would see me at trade shows or wherever and say, it would be really neat with Designer's Pencil if I've tried to make a game, if I could make a game. Because what I really want to do is program games. And I heard this from everyone.
Really?
Kids who played games all said, I really wish I could program games. That would be the ultimate cool. So that's why we did GameMaker, and we took the basic engine that we had done with Designer's Pencil and wrote this language, created this language that you could use, which is a language that we would, use ourselves. And to test it, internally we wrote a version of Pitfall, and we said, well, if we can do Pitfall with the language and it plays great, then we've got something, and we were able to do that.
Wow. Did that ever see the light of day? Did you guys market that Pitfall and send it out?
It may have actually been on the Commodore 64 disc version. The cartridge version obviously didn't have it, but the disc version had some sample games. I think Pitfall may have been on there. Had the entire
I don't remember there being Pitfall.
256 screens, exactly the same game.
That's awesome.
Written in the language.
Did you ever see that? Yeah, that's right. You weren't a Commodore 64 guy, were you? That was amazing. And I'm sorry, the other 64 projects, I know you'd mentioned that you'd worked on some more.
No, really, just Designer's Pencil and GameMaker. And then the Nintendo came out. And then did a lot of work on the Nintendo 8-bit Nintendo, the Super Nintendo. I guess I personally didn't do anything on Game Boy, but I was involved in a lot of projects. And now, a lot of people don't know, but David Crane and I founded Skyworks in 1995, and we do online games. Right. And there are people who play our games by the millions online and don't know it's us.
Right.
I mean, I've actually met people who said, well, I've been to the Candy Stand, which is a huge gaming site that we do, and I love this game or that game and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, you know who did that game? That was David Crane, the guy who did Pitfall. And people just say, oh, I can't believe it. No wonder the games are so good. Then they get it.
Yeah, it does.
And the beauty is we've come full circle, because to do great internet games, they've got to be really small because you have to download them.
Sure.
And they're not $10 million budgets. So it's kind of back to the 2600 again, except the graphics are much better. And it's much harder. It's very challenging, just like it was to do a 2600 cartridge. It's very challenging to do a really cool game experience in a very small amount of space on the internet.
That's amazing.
Now, so it's a perfect fit for us.
You guys do branded games, that's correct, for different companies. I think Nabisco was mentioned from Alan. And
Nabisco. Nabisco owns Lifesavers Candy.
Oh, okay.
In 1997, we launched a site called the Candy Stand, which is ranked by Nielsen ratings as the number 3 trafficked gaming site on the internet.
Wow.
Has about 50 games on it that are free, all sponsored by the various brands in Nabisco. And it's not ridiculous sponsorship. I mean, there's not a Lifesavers running around the screen. If there's a baseball game, there's a banner in the arena.
Sure.
In the stadium. It's contextual branding.
Sure.
If there's a car racing game, there are logos on the car.
Right.
But it's all great free games that are sponsored by all the advertisers.
So you don't have to face traditional banner advertising issues where, like, I think PopCap has a lot of banner ads. Basically, that their direct income is related to other companies supporting their ad banners. In this case, your branded companies have their own divisions that basically subsidize the cost.
Right. Come in
your
and
paycheck.
sponsor the game from the get-go.
Right.
So, and then more and more people that market to kids and teens online seek us out because they've seen all our work. We have over 100 games on the internet.
Nice.
And will come to us, like Pepsi came last year and said, we're going to launch a new flavor of Mountain Dew called Code Red.
Yeah.
We're going to do an
Code Red.
online promotion, and we need a game. So we did a game called Mission Code Red, which was specific for them, targeted their demographic, was the type of game they wanted, and it was on Pepsi for a year promoting that product launch.
Now, do you end up doing like what PopCap does and release like Win32 versions of your games after the fact?
That's something we're just going into now. As a matter of fact, in about a month or a month and a half, there's going to be a bowling game that we're releasing for download and pay model.
Sure.
That's done by David Crane, which is absolutely the best bowling game you've ever played.
Is it playable right now? If my listeners went on, could they find it anywhere?
Well, there's a tiny mini version of it that has been up for many years. It's been incredibly popular on Shockwave.com, on CandyStand.com. And what we've done is we've taken that mechanic, which so many people have emailed us and said, I love this game, can I get it for my computer?
Right.
So we've made a blown out version, full screen, full 3D, reflections of the pins on the alley, just much cooler. Great animations. And we're going to release that in about 4 to 6 weeks.
Outstanding. And where will they be able to get that? Are you going to go through retail vendors, or are you going to buy from your site?
We have an unannounced partnership with one of the major portals where our games will be available for download. You won't be able to miss it. Skyworks games will be available for download, actually through a variety of portals, but one of the biggest ones will introduce the bowling game.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
That's great.
So that's coming, and that's exciting.
How do you... Now, you've worked on both consoles and computers.
Yep.
Do you still code now, or are you strictly management now, or do you still get your hands dirty?
Well, I run the company. The company is founded by David Crane and I, and we have another partner, Bill Wentworth, who's a brilliant designer, graphically and gameplay design, who's our third partner. And Bill and I really touch everything from the standpoint of concept. Do we like the design? Does it play? Send it back to the lab. Dave is on the West Coast. We're on the East Coast. So Dave is more concentrating on his specific projects, though he gets to look at a lot of things also. The short answer is I don't have time to code.
Absolutely.
But the honest answer is I still do.
And are these pet projects for yourself?
Pet project. It's pet projects. It's my second job. So I run the company 50 hours a week, 10 hours a day. And then at home at night, if there's a pet game that falls into a genre that I'm really interested in, I'll kind of just say, well, I'll take care of that one. And then in the evenings, it gets dark late at night, I'll sit down and write some code.
And can you let us in on something that's been brewing around on the computer for the last couple months or so?
Well, we have a puzzle game, a couple of puzzles games that are just about to launch on the Candy Stand in about a week. I guess August 15th they launch. If you go to the Candy Stand. And Nabisco World is a global entertainment site for all the Nabisco brands. There are 2 puzzle games, one launching on each of those. I did the puzzle games because I play them and I like them, and I said I'll do that.
Now we've covered on our show in the last couple of months. We've talked a lot about how we feel that game development, what the end result of what's being shipped shrink wrap, is losing its integrity gameplay wise. It's losing what you guys had being the one-man shows because of everybody's hand being in the process. People who wear suits that don't even play video games are going into designers and developers and saying, no, if it doesn't look like Quake 3, you're not going to write it. And then that goes down from the publisher to the house. The house, of course, wants their paycheck, so they've got to go back to the developers and say, look, I don't care if you've only got 2 weeks left. I want multiplayer in it no matter how bad it is.
Right.
How do you guys at Skyworks handle that? I mean, obviously, you're at the top, getting to make the decisions this time. How loose do you keep it with your developers? Do you let your developers have that kind of creative input? How do you guys run the show?
Well, I know what you're saying, and it happened to us as we transitioned from video games to computers. I mean, there were some scary times. Activision went through some peaks and valleys, and I remember some scary times at Activision when the marketing people who were behind the early days of Activision, the successful days of the first Activision. I mean, the current Activision is very successful, but it's essentially a different company.
Absolutely.
In the successful days of the first Activision, the product development lab was locked. And the marketing people couldn't go in there. And they couldn't comment on a game. And they couldn't see a game until the game was done. And when it was done and we said it was done, we gave it to them and said, here, you market it.
Nice.
And we like that.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I bet.
When that door became unlocked and the marketing guys came in and said, hey, this sells, so do something like this. You know, that's when Dave and I and Al started running away screaming. Because that was really scary. Because we always believed that the game designers were the ones who decide what the people are going to like, not based on what the people currently like.
Right.
It doesn't take anybody with a quarter of a brain to say, last year, 42 first-person shooters sold. I think we should do another 43rd first-person shooter.
Right.
So, I mean, there's no skill in that. To anticipate the trend is really what makes the games great. I mean, David Crane anticipated it with Pitfall, and there have been 150 knockoffs since then. So in our company, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. We have a lot of very bright, creative guys, and we certainly give them the ability to be creative. On the other side of the coin, when you got people with the experience that we have,
yes,
who know interactivity and know what's going to play and can sit in a room and say, here's the idea, it's going to look like this, it's going to play like this, and anticipate this is right, this will work before a line of code is written.
Absolutely.
You know, we take a great amount of effort to be involved in the process and to steer it.
Right.
But we're not saying we have the only good ideas. Certainly there are people in the company who come up with great ideas as well.
Well, you're in a really unique position because the people sitting on the top chairs are the people who've sat on top of the world with Pitfall and,
right,
and all of these games. Right. But what about these other companies? You know, these other companies, these guys don't even play games. I mean, their kids probably don't even play games, or they're not even home to see their kids play games. Could you give advice to these guys? Can you help point them in the right direction? I mean, because we have actually what we call the mystery developer that's going to work with us. We did a show basically talking about this, and one of these guys wrote. He's from one of the biggest game development companies in the world. He wrote to us and said it's worse than you think it is.
It's bad.
It's incredibly
I know
bad.
It's bad.
And he says he's willing to give us, pretty much the whole undercover story as long as we can protect his identity and
right,
blah blah blah. And he said, and he's like, it all comes down from people who really don't know what's going on. Will that change? Do you think we can turn that around? I mean,
well, I don't claim to be an expert in the console industry today because really in the last 6 years, we've been doing strictly internet.
Absolutely.
I mean, we got a Sony PlayStation license at one point. We got a Nintendo license at one point. We even dabbled a little in the Game Boy Advance. But we've been very successful as an online gaming company. And there's so much demand for our product that we haven't had the time to put the effort into the console industry. So, because the internet is really, we think where all the excitement is. So, we're not experts in that area. I mean, I will say there's some work being done on console, some games that are absolutely great. They're fabulous. And they're clearly the vision of very creative, smart developers. And there are some brilliant ones out there. The vast majority of the stuff is very Me Too. To the point, I mean, to the point where I personally didn't attend E3 this year.
Bingo.
Because when last time I went, I have found that I come out of it depressed.
That's what happened.
That's what happened
exactly what happened to us.
I come out of it and I'm just shaking my head going,
I don't get it.
If I see one more driving game,
or fighting
one
game,
more fighting game, or one more first-person shooter game, and it's so depressing that so much money is poured into all these Me Too games. But that's not saying the industry as a whole is like that. It is a serious problem with the industry. But frankly, there are people in that industry today who would program rings around me, who are incredibly good and incredibly talented. And once in a while, you'll see a product, and it'll be very clear that this is fabulous, this is set a new genre, and this is great. And I would never say anything bad about those people because what they're doing is incredibly hard. But for every one of those, there's 10 of them that are marketing driven by executives who don't know a clue about gameplay, who just say, "Give me another one of these," and it's a shame.
Well, I don't think it's so much as the developer, the programmer's fault.
No, it's management.
Right. So I don't really. And what's sad today is that, like you said, there's a ton of excellent programmers out there whose talents aren't being used. We don't. Who knows what is being held back from these guys? I mean, like you said, and a lot of people feel like the question I really wanted to ask you was, we did an episode on the death of 2D gaming, which was basically our last episode. How do you think that's happening?
The death of 2D gaming?
Yeah. Do you think 2D gaming, like 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to be going, remember back then when everything was still flat?
Well, I'll speak blasphemy, but...
All right, I love it. That's what we want.
I'll take a chance on blasphemy, and it could seriously hurt my reputation if you have too many listeners. But a lot of... one thing I always say, and it's terrible, people think 3D is the future, and what I say about 3D is it's an unfortunate necessity that I have to deal with it. I am not jumping for joy about it. I do not think it's this incredible thing. And maybe it's because of the fact that what people don't get is that the machines are still not there. They think they're there, they're still not there. 3D is still ahead of the hardware, where they are not as crisp and instantaneous, 60 frames a second like 2D.
Well, you basically paraphrased that like last month's show.
and it's actually, it's worse in our world, in the browser world.
Oh, I bet.
Inside the browser, everybody's typing 3D. Oh, 3D's the future, 3D's this, and there are these other companies that compete with us, and we have our own 3D. We have 3D technology we use too. But when I do it, it's a necessary evil. It's because a client says, hey, I want 3D, and I saw XYZ, and I think it's great, and I want one like that. And we do it bigger, and we do it better, and we do it cooler, and we do it faster than the other guys. But you know something? I can't yet point at a 3D game we've done in the browser that's as much fun as a 2D game that Dave Crane did, that people are still playing 6 years ago, that came up on the internet in 1995.
Exactly.
So, I mean, to me, it's a necessary evil.
Okay,
now, when machines are unlimited and they can draw tens of millions of polygons instantaneously, then maybe it'll be there. But nobody has yet told me that a game that is 3D inherently plays better than a game that's 2D. It's not true.
Well, that goes to my next question. My biggest gripe and my biggest beef and what everybody hates me about is basically my number one bitch is that with the what you call the birth of 3D polygon gaming, we basically went 15 years backwards. That's just my biggest beef. It seemed like the sprite driven, the way the sprite hardware was going all the way up until, let's say, 1992, 1993, that the fake 3D, the processors were getting fast enough to where you don't need to render 6 trillion polygons. You just take a sprite. You basically, you got your scaling and rotating going on. I mean, we have 1 gigahertz processors now looking like Atari 2600s.
Yeah.
And my question to you is, do you think the gaming industry, with the polygon era that we're in now, has gone basically 15 years backwards? And do you think there's any kind of way that we can, because that, to me, at the end of the day, even if you did render 1 trillion polygons, it's still going to look like 1 trillion squares or 1 trillion triangles. It's not going to look, I don't look like, I'm not a 10 million rendered polygon.
Right.
I'm a human being. I am a sprite to me.
Well, no,
How do you feel
I
about
will
that?
say there are games that are made for 3D. I mean, SSX on the PlayStation 2, first-person snowboarding, is incredible. And that is better than you would ever do in 2D. And I will admit that. And that is the right concept for 3D. What drives me bonkers, and it's the right execution. I mean, fabulous job on it. Technologically, it's a masterpiece. Play, it's a masterpiece. The game is great. But when they get carried away and use 3D when 2D should have been used, or use 3D badly where the game chunks along at clunk, 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 I mean, that's when it belongs in the can. I mean, that you can just throw it away. If I ever sit down at a computer, and once again, we see it more on PCs, in browsers and things like that than we do in consoles. I mean, PS2s and GameCubes, Xboxes are pretty good at rendering a lot of polygons fast. But a bad 3D game is intolerable. And it's completely intolerable, and I can't stand it. And in that case, you are going back 15 years. Because there were never bad 2D games that were as bad as the bad 3D games.
Amen. I agree.
You know? But a good 3D game can hit the top of the world. I mean, a good 3D game can be incredible. I mean, Super Mario on the Nintendo 64 when it came out, an entire virtual world where you could walk this character around, was astounding. It was absolutely astounding how deep it was and how cool the world was. So there are great cases of the good usage, but there are many cases of the bad usage. And anybody who just says, oh no, 3D, it's all it is, all it is, they don't get it. I mean, I've played many $10 million budget 3D games where I've put down a controller and said, I'd rather play Tetris on the Game Boy in black and white. Because Tetris on the Game Boy in black and white when it first came out was incredibly addictive, incredibly fun. And it beats the living hell out of Joe Schmo's $10 million 3D game that chunks along at 6 frames a second and is begging to draw to the screen as fast as it can.
Why do you think the generation gimme, why do you think they accept this? Why? I mean,
they don't know better.
They don't know any
Well,
better.
I don't understand. When I was growing up playing your games, I couldn't accept anything less than the best. Now it's basically, if you can get it out, if it's beta. Basically, beta is acceptable now.
Oh yeah,
like you said,
really sad.
Like you said, you played it. You didn't let anybody see it until it was perfect, beyond perfect.
And if it wasn't perfect, it never went out.
Exactly.
We had finished games at Activision that never went out.
Right.
That never saw the light of day because they weren't good enough.
But now it's just like, the screen doesn't crash. It stayed up. It ran for 60 minutes and it didn't crash. Let it out the door for $50, $60. I mean, and that's the thing too.
Well, I have a theory, and I don't know if it's really a valid theory, but I think the mentality of people who like 2D games that are a lot of fun to play, like 2600 games, those people are fed by online games now. We call them casual gamers. Our Skyworks games are downloaded over 20 million times a month. And our most popular games are downloaded, not played, because once they're downloaded, they can be played 50 times in a session. The games are downloaded 2 to 3 million times a month, the most popular games. And we get emails from people saying, these are the best games I've ever played, the best games in the world, they're fabulous, incredible. They're not saying they're the best games except for my PlayStation 2 games. They're saying they're the best games. And that's the mentality of, I play the game, I played the bowling game, I played the basketball game, I played the football game, it's incredibly fun, and I play it 20 hours a week. Well, that's a casual gamer. That's somebody who enjoys a great game experience for the sake of the game experience rather than technology. I think console is so driven by technology. Wow, bang, zow, look at that. Oh, man, I'm so caught up in the technology. And there's some great console stuff, don't get me wrong. But I think the casual gaming aspect is equally popular on the Internet.
Let me ask you this. This is something that we've talked about a lot on the show, and I'm really concerned about this. Was it last show that we did Death of 2D Gaming?
I asked him about that. Go ahead.
Let me just expand on that.
It's really the shift of 2D gaming to online browsers.
But what I'm worried
about,
it's
not the death of 2D gaming.
What I'm worried about, though, is back when the 2600 was Vogue, when that was it, when there was nothing else, it was everything. Everybody loved it. 1 in 2 homes had a VCS.
Yep.
Everybody had it. As technology went on, people started wanting and expecting more. Now that 3D has come along, for the most part, I'm not saying not browser stuff, but for the most part, if it's not 3D, it ain't worth my time. 2D games don't sell on consoles.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
So what's going to happen in 2 years when 3D is all the rage on the web, and now your platform, your market, which everyone's willing to put up with it because it's in a browser. That's why Game Boy, I think, still sells, because people say, oh, it's a handheld. We can't expect it to do a million polygons. What happens when Game Boy 3D, which we know is not going to happen, but let's say the first 3D handheld comes out, all of a sudden, that's going to be the standard. No one's going to want a 2D game. What happens on the web when Shockwave 3D, which is already starting to permeate the pool games and all that stuff, what happens when all of a sudden, well, now it doesn't matter that it's on the web. We're not going to put up with 2D anymore. Everything has to be 3D. Everything has to be glitz because everybody has broadband now.
Yeah. What
happens?
But I think that's you're projecting the conventional wisdom of we're not going to put up with 2D. But
right.
The fact of the matter is, there will always be an audience.
So you think it will retain that?
The casual gamer doesn't know technology. They don't look at a game and go, oh, this is 3D, or oh, this is 2D, or this is using stereo sound and this isn't. They don't know that. All they know, the game comes up on the screen, how do I play? Can I figure it out in 10 seconds? I better be able to because I'm on the internet. I'm
Amen.
going to hit the back button if I can figure it out.
Right.
And then they take it, they do the play mechanic, and they either like it or they don't, and if they like it, they play it. And I think that they don't overanalyze the way the hardcore gaming market does. The hardcore gaming market, the Xbox, the PS2, the GameCube, they're overanalyzing everything. Because they're the hardcore gamers, and they're expected to, and they're brought up that way. I think there'll always be a casual gamer online who doesn't care what it's done in. Just put a fun game in front of me, I'll play it. And I think it'll still be like that.
But what happens when because the online game are people like you that know how to do it. PopCap, like I said, I bring them up a lot because I believe they still know how to make a fun game.
Fabulous, and I agree with you. And when they did their simple puzzle stuff,
like Bejeweled,
nobody said, "Oh, wait a minute, that looks like not 2600 graphics, but that looks like Nintendo 8-bit Nintendo graphics from 1986."
Right.
Nobody said that. They're equivalent. They just played it because it was fun.
But you don't think that there's a mentality there where it's like, well, it's on the web, so I don't have to have that kind of expectation.
No,
you don't think so?
I'm a believer in gameplay always wins.
Me too.
Gameplay always wins.
But you believe that general populace believes that?
I think general populace does. I don't think hardcore gamers do. But right now, our market isn't hardcore gamers. Our market is casual gamers.
But how do you compensate? How do you explain the Me Too thing? If Quake 3 gets repackaged 1,000,000 times and it sells every single time, there's nothing new under the sun with that game. It's always the same complements and weapons. They don't care.
Yeah.
I got one guy, I know a friend of mine, he doesn't care. When Quake 4 comes out, I'll go out and buy it right now. I don't care what it is, I'll just buy it.
Right.
We hear that all the time.
Yeah, the biggest rage right now is Doom 3.
Doom 3.
I mean,
but I'm saying that's not the casual gamer. That's the hardcore gamer.
You think so?
Okay,
you don't think it's
no.
Okay.
Okay, then my question is then my question would be because I've said this before. Me, Shane, and I have always felt like there's going to be another video game Fallout. Do you think instead then of a video game Fallout, there's just going to be a hardcore gamer Fallout? Basically, it's going to get to a peak, and like systems like the Xbox and the GameCube and their next generation won't sell because the hardcore gamer will just go, been there, done that.
No. I think the hardcore gamer will always buy the next greatest console, next greatest game. What'll happen is what happened the first time when it fell is there's too much inventory and there's too many Me Too products. You can't go to Christmas with 9 equivalently playing driving games and expect them all to sell. The 1 or 2 best will sell, the other 7 won't, and then the retailer will get burned or the publisher will get burned, and there could be a fallout because there's too much Me Too product.
So you do feel like there might be a fallout?
There may be.
When do you think it'll happen? That's hard guess.
I can't claim to be a console expert, but it scares me that there's so much Me Too product out there.
Well,
I think it won't be a crash in the industry, but I don't think you'll have 3 major players
do you think
surviving for that long.
Do you think because since basically there's bottomless pockets with Sony and Microsoft that it might not be as bad as 84?
I don't think they're bottomless.
Really?
You don't?
No.
I mean, Xbox is losing, $250 a box?
They're not going to wait forever. If they haven't made a business out of it in a couple of years,
they'll just can it.
They'll can it. It's not bottomless. I mean, they're a public company. If they pour money into it and it doesn't go, they'll drop out.
Well, we saw Nintendo's doing that.
And that's the type of shakeout there'll be. I mean, the industry won't crash like it did in '83, but certainly there could be a fallout where one of the systems will go away.
Now, in a 2D environment, I know. Are we taking up your time? I know we
said
15 minutes.
It's fine.
We can talk to you guys for hours.
You guys are bad because you get me going.
I'm sorry.
Hey, you're really bad. You get me going. And
that's the whole show. That's the whole point of the show.
Yeah. Have you ever even listened to us?
No, he probably doesn't even know who we are.
You guys, I'm definitely going to.
You'll love us.
You'll love us. This is what we talk about every year.
Yeah. But now I'll get my blood pressure going every day.
So we can have Gary Kitchen as our guest speaker. Fortunately, it's only once a month, so you have to wait to get your fix.
Oh, good.
We talk a lot about what we call engine whoring.
Right.
In the industry, it's basically the Me Too concept. The problem is let's take the Quake engine. You could do 1,000,000 things with that engine.
Of course.
They don't. They do the exact same thing. I saw something, and maybe you could comment on this. Have you ever seen, what was the name of it? I just drew a blank. It was somebody took the Quake 2 engine and made a water slide game out of it.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that?
Saw it.
That was the most brilliant thing I'd ever seen. I mean, I was looking around for content for the show, and I ran across this. It was some cutesy-looking little Nintendo-ish game where it had little panda bears and little cute little ducks.
Right.
And you used their water slides. It was a water slide simulator.
Yeah.
It was the coolest thing ever. Why doesn't? I understand they want to make money. Everybody wants to make money. Why is the engine whoring so prevalent? Why won't somebody move on and do something else with it?
Lack of creativity and lazy. I mean,
think so?
There are only
Owned.
There you go. There's only a small subset of brilliant people. I mean, you go to E3 and you see 100,000 developers there. How many of them you think are actually brilliant?
Yeah, exactly.
5% of them?
That's why you walk out shaking your head.
I mean, believe me, I've employed a lot of them in my days. And it's, it's hard to find programmers or designers that are brilliant. I mean, you got a lot of people that are just, they're just along for the ride. If he did it, I'll do it too.
There you go.
There you go. That pretty much solves
you
that.
hold on to the brilliant ones when you find them because they're few and far between. But I mean, I always laugh about the word engines because we'll pitch a concept to an advertiser or a sponsor and say, well, we're going to do this type of game, and they go, well, yeah, I saw you did another baseball game. So basically, you're just going to use the engine and change the graphics.
Oh, no.
And we're like, no. We're going to do a game. Don't you understand that every game we do, while we may have a little bit of code that we start with or some basics or whatever, I mean, we don't rewrite everything every time.
Right.
But by the time you're done making it a masterpiece, it is new. We do not just take this module, throw it down, slap something on top of it, and in an hour we've got a game. It's such a misconception. People think it all the time.
Well, who could blame them, though?
But that's the way it is. But you've got engines, right? I know you've got engines. And
you think is it cost? Do they say if you can make it, if you can use that old engine, is that the whole thing?
They always try that, and that never works. But
owned.
So it is product dumping. It's just a new version of product dumping.
Well,
they're trying to get as many. It's more or less like we know that it's going to crash. Let's see how much we can get out.
No. It's more the fact that somebody trying to save money. So we actually resolved it in our industry. We resolved it. We have games in a catalog that we relicense and reskin, and that truly is an engine. I mean, if someone comes to me and says I have a promotion around the Major League Baseball and I want to do a baseball game for this summer promotion online, I say to them, I have 2 baseball games. They're done. Would you like to use one of these? The one thing I can't grant you is exclusive rights to it. It's been used before. Ford Motor Company used it, or Pepsi used it, or Lifesavers used it. But I can license it to you. You can use it on your website for 12 weeks. And they say, great. It's very cost effective for them. And what I do is I take the game and I rebrand it. I put their sponsorship in it, but it's the identical game. But when someone comes and says, well, I want an original game. I want a game that does this, and this, and the car does this, and that does that, and you go through a tunnel. And I say, okay, great, it's going to cost this much money. And then they say, well, you did a racing game already. Just use the engine. That's when it gets nutty. Because there is no engine for
And you get a lot of that, I bet, don't you? Is there a lot of that?
Well, there's a lot of ignorance as to how games are made.
Yeah, everybody wants to tell you exactly what to do, but they want you to do it for nothing, basically.
Yeah. Well, I want that game. Great, I can give you that game. But I want you to do this with it, and I want this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. Well, what game? Well, I want that game. But I want you to add in that I'm racing against 7 cars instead of racing by myself, and I want to be multiplayer against us over the internet, and I want to be able to chat, and I want you to add buildings on the side, and I want to have it rain when you go through the weather. But I want that game. It's like, well,
I want to pay for that game.
That's not that game anymore. That's another game.
Do you find that people have a lack of desire for originality?
No.
Really?
No. Everybody wants their own thing, uniquely theirs, but they don't want to pay a lot of money for it. Right.
Well, okay, on the consumer end, because we hang out in IRC channels and majority of people chat channels, and they go, if you talk to anybody, they want to see Mario forever. They want 500 Mario sequels. They want 300 Sonic sequels.
Oh no, look, genres will live forever. I mean, there have always been genres back to the 2600. There'll always be genres. And I can't argue with the logic of doing Mario 12. I mean, I'm a big Mario fan. I have great respect for Nintendo's gameplay. I mean, Nintendo is one of the few companies out there that has said, we're going to take as long as it takes and put as many people on it and spend as much money as we have to make a game great. And many times they've done that, and it shows. Their gameplay is extraordinary in a lot of cases. But I think that's fine. If you want to do Mario 20, go ahead and do it. If you want to do Zelda 20, go ahead and do it. I'm a believer in those, what's the word? They're almost brands. You know, it's like Oreo, putting out Oreo. Well, yeah, Mario's a brand, and you're always going to put out a Mario game. So what I resent is 20 other people, besides the Mario people, putting out a Mario game. And just
like the kart racing games on the PlayStation.
Yeah, just so many of the same thing. I mean, I support the original guy who came up with the concept and built the franchise, continuing to feed the franchise. I think that there's a market for it. You're in the business of making money. People love it, and they're going to buy it. They'll buy the next Mario game. Just when the rest of the industry's marketing morons look and say, let's do a Mario game. They sell, let's do another Mario game. Let's all do Mario games. That's when the market goes to hell.
Well, the thing is, my biggest thing is I just have a really hard time with sequel mania. That's what it just seems like.
Yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying.
I mean, I've been doing this since Pong, and I'm at the point now I can't buy a Nintendo 64 or a PS2 because I played these games already. That's how I feel. How many times?
Give me something new.
How many times do you guys expect me to continue to play the game I played back in 1981?
Or at least if you're going to make
82.
me play the game again, do it as a pack-in. Whatever happened with that?
Yeah.
I understand that. That's another way of looking at it.
So
I look at it more as the next adventure.
So you just look at it as a continuation,
like more of a good thing.
Well, like Indiana Jones, I thought all 3 movies were good.
Yeah, but there was Indiana Jones 25.
Yes.
There was only 3.
Or there's a 4th coming. You know?
Well, it's not more or less like a continuation. I feel like it's basically somebody dressed up the graphics and re-released it.
Yeah.
And how many times I'm supposed to play
To some
this?
extent that happens.
How many times am I supposed to play it? Like with Mario Sunshine.
Yeah.
To me, it's still Mario 64.
Right.
I don't see anything, and what kind of bugs me about Mario Sunshine, and I've asked people, and I go, okay, I'm checking this game out. This is big village. I'm really impressed with the graphics. Where are all the people? Where are all the people?
Yep.
And that's what the thing is. Like, I can understand everything's getting better, but like you said, people are getting lazy. They're going, okay, I have 650 megabytes now. I don't have to sit up there and cut corners and try and figure out how in the world I'm going to get all these characters on the screen at the same time and interact at the same time and come up with some kind of gameplay and some kind of storyline and do the graphics and the sound. They're more or less like, I have 650 megabytes.
I might as well use it.
I might as well
yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. But it does happen.
Well, man, I'm just like totally overwhelmed. I think we got this is so cool. I keep you here forever.
Now you're going to get me in trouble.
No, we're not here to get you in trouble. We're not here to get anybody in trouble. This is the only time when we get to come and have people understand us. You know,
yep.
we have 1,000, 2,000 regular dedicated listeners, and we've managed to weed out the people that obviously shouldn't be listening to this show anyway.
Right. This isn't a show for you. Go away.
Basically,
exactly.
We've had to say that.
We've had to do that.
We've had to say, look. If you love Final Fantasy X, you're not going to like the show. Just stop now. Save your bandwidth.
Yep.
So we try to give the people what our people what they want.
Well, what happened was that we did a show on what makes a classic game.
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
And that's when we really we upset a lot of people because we got a lot of emails saying Chrono Trigger was a classic game, and we sat up there and we couldn't understand the draw.
We reviewed it. We actually hooked it up, put it on my Wega, and we actually sat down on the air and played it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we couldn't be possibly underwhelmed more. We were an hour and 15 minutes into the game, we were bored out of our minds. I mean, even not just the fact that we weren't into RPGs or something like that. And then we had people write says, well, you didn't give it enough time. Well, if I can't get a game to get my attention in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean, something's lacking here. And we just caught flack after flack after flack about that. And it's like, well, this is so original. It's like, no, it's not. This has been great. Here, let me grab that.
Yeah, great. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary, for coming on to the show. We appreciate your time, and we hope you guys do really good over at Skyworks. Everything looks like it's running just great. That was one of my favorite interviews, by the way, at Classic Gaming Expo. Gary Kitchen's a real passionate guy, and we like passionate guys here at Retro Gaming Radio. We'll have some more interviews with some of the other former Activision guys on the future shows, so you stick around. We'd like to end the show off with a Retro Gaming Radio exclusive, the first public broadcast of the new song cut specifically for the Dragon's Lair 3D soundtrack, and it does appear in the game. You'll just have to find it. This is Julie Eisenhower singing He's My Guy. It's going to take care of it for me, folks. Until next time, keep it retro.